Chapter 1245. It wasn't until Lu Yi cut him down that he was able to clearly see his opponent's appearance. He was less than a meter tall, and his figure was thin. At first glance, he seemed to be malnourished, but his exposed skin was inscribed with extremely profound markings. Those markings crisscrossed each other, and all of them revealed a pitch-black color and revealed an extremely strange aura. For there was no doubt that these patterns were tattoos, and they were obvious tattoos. In the 9 provinces, there were cultivators who liked to tattoo their bodies with obvious tattoos to show off their unique style. Moreover, these tattoos could often play a special role. This was especially true for body cultivators and ghost cultivators. Body cultivators could use defensive tattoos to increase their defensive capabilities, while ghost cultivators could use special tattoos to increase their explosive power and concealment abilities. Lu Yi also had tattoos on his body, the void tattoo on the back of his hand, which his master had given him. With this tattoo as the core, he had constructed a storage space. However, the tattoos in the 9 provinces were clearly different from the ones Lu Yi saw. The tattoos in the 9 provinces were man-made, but the ones in front of him were natural. In other words, this dead guy had these tattoos since birth. It wasn't just him. Every member of his race was like this. The ghost race. Among the several major sects in the cultivation world, ghost cultivators were the most adept at concealment and assassination, and the ghost race was the natural ancestor of this path. According to Yang Qing, the reason why the ghost cultivators had appeared in the human race was because they had slowly evolved and developed from the ghost race. Thus, if one were to compare the races of the starry sky, which race was the most adept at concealment and assassination, it would undoubtedly be the ghost race. Lu Yi had only heard of it before, but this time, he had truly witnessed the power of the ghost race. When his clone was ambushed, he couldn't react at all. Moreover, the other party had immediately fled after succeeding. If he hadn't spread out the blood sea in time, he really wouldn't have been able to catch him. He had seen ghost cultivators of all shapes and sizes in the 9 provinces. Impermanence was one of the strongest, but even impermanence would not have been so simple to kill him before ascending to the constellation realm. Lu Ye's soul was extremely powerful and his perception was extremely sharp. Although he had just won a battle and was somewhat relaxed, it was not to the extent that he would not notice someone approaching him from behind. In this world, under the premise of the same realm, only ghost cultivators could do such a thing. If it were any other race, no matter how proficient they were in concealment and assassination, they would not be able to succeed. The encounter this time allowed him to remind himself in his heart. Even though everything had gone smoothly so far and he'd even obtained some gains, he couldn't underestimate the cultivators of other sects because of this. In a battle at this level, the slightest underestimation might bring about an immeasurable calamity. After dealing with the Ghost Clan's corpse, there weren't many spoils of war. There was only an ordinary-looking but extremely sharp spiritual treasure short blade. The Ghost Clan was not tall, and because they were good at sneak attacks, they did not use weapons that were too big. Short blades or daggers were their standard weapons. The quality was not bad. Looking to the side, there was a big hole in the doppelganger's chest, and the scarlet dragon battle robe was dyed red. If it were a normal person, such an injury would have already killed him, but the doppelganger was fine. The doppelganger's essence was based on half of the talent tree. Lu Ye's qi, blood, spiritual power, and even soul power were condensed. Strictly speaking, it was a pure energy body, so unless it was completely destroyed, the doppelganger would not die. The penetrating wound in the chest had long been healed, but the scarlet dragon battle robe could not be healed, so it looked a little miserable. The experience just now was undoubtedly very dangerous. If the Ghost Clan's target was not the doppelganger but the main body, it was very likely that the main body would have been seriously injured. Lu Yi was not worried about dying. Although the doppelganger could basically use all his abilities, the strength of their physiques was completely different. The doppelganger was just an energy body, so it was impossible for it to have a strong physique like his. If the Ghost Clan really attacked the main body, it would not have been able to penetrate the chest with a single blow. From this point of view, the Ghost Clan probably saw something and deliberately attacked the doppelganger. because he probably also knew that even if he really attacked the main body, he might not be able to succeed. Persimmons were always easy to pinch. The doppelganger changed into a set of clothes and quickly left. It was a pity that the Scarlet Dragon battle robe was destroyed. Lu Yi liked this protective treasure robe from the War Merit Pavilion, and it was also the iconic attire of sword cultivator Li Debai. Now that it was damaged and difficult to repair, he could only put it away as a souvenir. The huge sea of blood had been put away by Lu Yi, but it was not completely withdrawn. Around him, there was still a rich blood color lingering. As far as the eye could see, it was like a small blood cloud, only about 10 feet in radius. Because it was more condensed, the blood cloud was red, as if it was burning. Standing in the sea of blood, Lu Yi silently sensed. When he was looking for the Ghost Clan, he vaguely felt something unusual, but at that time, he was focused on finding the Ghost Clan, so he did not have time to distinguish it carefully. At this moment, he calmed down and investigated, but there was no abnormality. This made him puzzled. At his level of cultivation, it was impossible for his senses to be wrong. The only difference was whether it was blurry or clear. He carefully recalled the scene from back then, raised a hand and gently stroked it. Ripples spread out in all directions, spreading towards the blood cloud. He had originally thought that it was because of the method he had used, but after some testing he found that this was not the case. There was still no abnormality. Unable to understand, unable to investigate, Lu Yi could not continue to dwell on this question. He could only withdraw the sea of blood and continue on his way. However, that strange feeling appeared again at this moment. It was vague and indescribable, as if there was something in a certain direction of the Alpha origin that had formed a secret connection with his sea of blood. Lu Yi was greatly surprised. Was there some great treasure belonging to the blood race in the Alpha origin stage? Why else would it give him such a feeling? He hurriedly analyzed it and finally confirmed the direction of the connection, which was to the left. Without any hesitation, he urged his blood cloud to fly in that direction. Along the way, he constantly felt that the guidance coming from that direction was intermittent. Sometimes he could not detect it for a long time, and sometimes it would come several times in half a day. Moreover, the direction was not constant. The general direction did not change, which was to the left, but the specific location was constantly changing. Lu Yi guessed that he was wrong. It should not be some great treasure belonging to the blood race that had appeared. It was most likely something else. He could not help but feel excited. If the situation was as he thought, things would be interesting. Ever since entering the Alpha origin stage and encountering the first blood race cultivator, Zhou Feng, Lu Yi had been thinking about how he could do something to the blood race cultivators participating in the battle for the Divine Sea. After all, killing blood race cultivators was the most convenient for him. However, he did not have any good ideas. This place was too large, and it was very difficult to encounter other cultivators in the early stages, let alone specific ones. But if it was really another situation, it would be a pleasant surprise. He did not need to do anything, as the other party would be able to do it for him. At the same time as Lu Yi set off, at the edge of the platform where cultivators from different worlds gathered under the reincarnation tree, an old man with white hair and a beard reached out and stroked his beard. "Nephew, your friend is quite amazing. He is only an 8th order Divine Sea cultivator. I dare not say that no one will be able to reach this level in the future, but it is definitely unprecedented." Du Lang looked at Lu Ye's name on the pillar to the right of the door and laughed. "I didn't expect him to be so powerful." The old man and the young man were originally preparing to leave here and return to the Red Sky continent, but after Du Lang saw Lu Ye's name appear in the 11th position, the old man decided to stay. Because he could see that Du Lang seemed to want to know what the end result of this so-called friend was. Du Lang did not refuse. It was a matter of 2 months anyway, so there was no hurry. Now, in the top 100 list on the right, the name of Lu Yi from the 9 Heavens world had risen to the 7th position. Compared to before, it had risen by 4 places. Obviously, this was not the result of killing one person, but at least 2 or even 3 to have such an increase. Du Lang was sure that this Lu Yi was the one he met in the Spirit Jade Lode, but he really did not expect him to be so powerful. He could not help but secretly rejoice that he did not have any malicious intent because of Lu Ye's low cultivation. With Lu Ye's current performance, if he had any malicious intent, he was afraid that grass would have grown on his grave by now. If this child can come out alive, he will definitely become a great person in the future. Nephew, such a person is worthy of befriending, the old man said slowly. Wan Du Lang did not comment. Before befriending Lu Yi, he did not know how strong he was or what his future would be. For him, if he felt that someone was worthy of befriending, then he would befriend him. If his temperament did not match, no matter how great his potential was, he was not willing to flatter others. He was just a little regretful. Due to his heavy responsibility, he was unable to participate in the following battles. Otherwise, he would be able to fight side by side with Brother Lu and experience his might up close. He wanted to show Brother Lu the difference between himself and these elite geniuses. While the old man and the young man from the Scarlet Sky continent were paying attention to the changes in Lu Ye's ranking, the masters from other worlds naturally noticed as well. Among several thousand Ninth Order Divine Sea cultivators, only 1/8 Order had achieved such a high ranking, so it was difficult for anyone not to pay attention to him. Everyone thought that Lu Ye's temporary 11th place might be due to luck, but when his ranking suddenly shot up, everyone knew that this was no longer something that could be explained by luck alone. This was a manifestation of strength, and if it was just pure luck, then Lu Ye's strength would be even greater. If it was just pure luck, then the ranking would constantly fall, and it would be impossible for it to rise. Thinking back to Yang Qing's domineering action of throwing a 9-star treasure into the treasure pond, it was obvious that he had great confidence in his juniors. 3. Chapter 1246. Somewhere in the Alpha Origin region, 3 figures were quietly lying in wait. Among the 3, there were 2 men and 1 woman. 3 at this stage of the battle for the Divine Sea, some people had already begun to form groups. However, because the chances of encountering each other were low, there were usually only 2 or 3 people traveling together. For example, Lu Yi had encountered a combination of a body cultivator and a magic cultivator. The 3 of them had coincidentally bumped into each other. Because they were worried about the possible dangers ahead, they immediately hit it off and decided to temporarily join forces. After observing for a while, they had already discovered something. As expected, those bastards from the blood race have set up defenses ahead. This is going to be difficult. Among the 3, a man with a mustache gnashed his teeth and looked like he was having a headache. It was no secret that the blood race had a secret technique that allowed them to sense and communicate with each other in the Alpha Origin region. Therefore, many cultivators participating in the battle for the Divine Sea had been warned by their elders that they must be careful during this stage. They must not be discovered by the blood race, or they would be doomed. This was an advantage that no other race had. It was not that the blood race was shameless, but the blood race's actions were undoubtedly bad news for the cultivators of the other domains. If they wanted to continue forward, they would have to break through the blood race's defenses and take a huge risk. Some people had made some tactical adjustments to deal with the blood race. After entering the Alpha Origin region, they would directly rush to the center and cross the dangerous area before the blood race's defensive line was set up. They would lie in wait and wait for the final moment to decide the victor. However, the blood race were not fools. After experiencing such things several times, they had also adjusted their strategy. They would wait for the rabbit to appear in the center. Therefore, until the situation was clear, no one knew where the blood race would appear. If one felt that they were in the center, they would likely appear in the middle of the Alpha Origin region and set up a defensive line to intercept the cultivators heading to the center. If one felt that the center was safe and rushed over in advance, one might run into the blood race's river. One could only rely on luck. Many experts from various realms had protested against the reincarnation tree because of this matter. However, the reincarnation tree would not care about such matters. In the end, the matter was left unsettled. Fortunately, the blood race knew that they shouldn't go too far. Therefore, although they won a lot of places in the Divine Sea battle, their ranking was always at the bottom. They wouldn't fight for a higher ranking. This was a compromise that the blood race had made. They knew that if they went too far, they would attract the hostility of all races. At that time, no matter how mysterious the blood race's secret techniques were, no matter how strong they would still end up in a situation where everyone wanted to fight. It was precisely this strategy that allowed the blood race to reap decent rewards in the battle of the Divine Sea every 100 years. It also indirectly allowed the blood race to produce many Constellation Realm elites generation after generation, continuing their strength. The mustache Dingyu was from the Xuandu world. Beside him were two temporary companions. The man, Zhao Yunlu, was from the Conqueror Star, and the woman, Yu Yaorao, was from the Nine Mysterious World. They were the most outstanding cultivators of the Divine Sea realm in their respective domains. However, even if the three of them worked together temporarily, it would not be appropriate for them to show themselves. Jade Demon sneered, "Do you want to take a detour?" The blood race's defensive line couldn't be too long. It was at most 50,000 kilometers long. They should be safe after going around this part. Dingyu shook his head and said, "There are quite a lot of vampires. What we observed before should only be one of their teams. Don't be fooled by the Sea of Blood, there are at most 5 or 6 vampires in it. There are at least 3 or even 4 vampires in a team like this. Each team is responsible for one line of defense. If we really want to take a detour, we don't know how far we will have to go. Moreover, we can't guarantee that we will definitely avoid their line of defense. If we manage to avoid their line of defense, we will encounter another team of vampires on the other side." Yu Yaorao also knew this. She sighed slightly and said, "Then we can only wait. Let's see who loses their patience first." All right. What was certain was that it wasn't just the 3 of them who were stopped here. There must be more people lying in wait. It was just that no one wanted to take the lead. Therefore, they didn't show themselves and were all waiting for others to make the first move. Once others made the first move, they would take the opportunity to break in. It was also a good choice to fish in troubled waters. "What do you think, fellow Taoist Zhao?" Dingyu looked at Zhao Yunlu. Zhao Yunlu was different from the 2 of them who came from ordinary large domains. The tyrant star that Zhao Yunlu came from was considered a top domain. Therefore, in terms of strength and foundation, Zhao Yunlu was stronger than the 2 of them. However, from their short contact, Zhao Yunlu wasn't easy to talk to. This was probably the common trait of experts who came from top domains. They all felt that they were the most powerful and looked down on those who came from large domains. This time, if it wasn't for the blood race setting up a defensive line in front of them, Zhao Yunlu wouldn't have moved with them. Zhao Yunlu said indifferently, "You guys can decide. There's no need to ask me." Dingyu couldn't help but have a headache. He was most afraid of this kind of people. If he couldn't communicate with them in depth, it would be difficult to reach a consensus on certain matters. "There's an aura approaching," Yu Yaorao suddenly said. She cultivated a type of perception-type secret technique. Therefore, she was more outstanding than the other 2 in terms of detecting the enemy. Dingyu quickly asked, "Which direction?" Yu Yaorao raised her hand and pointed. Dingyu couldn't help but reveal a stunned expression. "Why is it coming from here?" Yes. He thought that there was someone rushing in from outside. If that was the case, he could rope them in to move together. After all, there's strength in numbers. Maybe if he could rope in a few more people, they would be able to face the blood race who were setting up a defensive line in front of them. However, the direction that Yu Yaorao pointed to was actually the side. At this time, there should only be people rushing in. How could they be coming from the side? This aura. While speaking, Yu Yaorao revealed a surprised expression, because she felt that the aura of this person was somewhat strange. It seemed to be somewhat similar to the aura of those blood race? Blood race. Yes. There was no need to suspect anything, because in that direction, a mass of blood light was imprinted into their eyes. It was a blood cloud with a radius of about 10 zhang. Because it was compressed enough, its color was very rich. However, its speed wasn't fast. It was as if it was drunk. At first glance, it looked like a large piece of fresh blood curd. Dingyu and Yu Yaorao were still observing. Zhao Yunliu's indifferent expression changed. His eyes revealed a stern look. "There's only one. He should have been summoned to join us. Kill him. Kill him." born in a top-tier domain, he was proud and arrogant. He originally wanted to display his strength in the Alpha Origin stage and become famous throughout the world. Who would have thought that he would be blocked by a group of blood race? He had long been filled with anger. Now that he saw a lone blood race member, how could he let him go? The reason why he could determine that it was a lone blood race member was very simple. The size of the blood cloud was too small. It was obviously created by a lone blood race member for the sake of convenience. After saying this, he directly rushed out, not caring about the opinions of the two beside him. He directly rushed towards the mass of blood curd. Ding Yu raised his hand, but was simply unable to stop him. He could only curse inwardly and follow closely. Therefore, he was unwilling to join hands with someone from a top-tier domain like Zhao Yunlu. He usually had an indifferent appearance, but at critical moments, he liked to act arbitrarily and did not consider the feelings of his companions. With the two moving, Yu Yaorao had no choice but to follow. In a split second, spiritual power surged. Like waterfalls, sword light converged into a river and shot towards the blood cloud. Zhao Yunlu was a sword cultivator, and flying swords were his specialty. It was also because of this reason that he did not put this blood race member in his eyes, because the blood race's blood river technique was useless against him. Of course, he was not stupid enough to barge into someone else's blood river and put himself in prison. Following closely behind the flying swords were Yu Yaorao's numerous techniques. Ding Yu did not have so many tricks. He was a body cultivator, so he could only wave his fists and stimulate his vital energy and spiritual power, striking out fist energy from a distance. In an instant, the three of them formed a triangular formation, surrounding the blood cloud in the middle. Sharp attacks blasted into the blood cloud, reducing its foundation. This was the best way for the various races in the starry sky to deal with the blood race. First, weaken the foundation of the blood race's blood river technique. Only then would they have a chance to kill them. Louis had a headache. He had rushed here by following the mysterious feeling. He thought that he would see the scene he expected, but who would have thought that on the way here, all of a sudden, 3 humans appeared and attacked him fiercely. If it was just that, it would have been fine, but he saw a familiar figure among them. 9 profound worlds. This charming woman who had been thrown into the world of the fairy tree with him to carry out the test, although there wasn't much friendship between them, but in the world of the fairy tree, Lui had more or less owed her a favor. Many things were explained to him by Yu Yaorao. This made it difficult to kill them. Moreover, in such a situation, 1 against 3, even if Lu Yi wanted to kill them, he did not have much chance, unless he found a way to get them into the blood river. But these 3 were obviously very experienced. All of them were using long-range attacks. They did not get close to his blood cloud at all, and did not give him the slightest chance. He could only run and try to break out of the encirclement in one direction. It was the direction where Ding Yu was. This made him furious. Originally, Zhao Yunliu's actions made him unhappy, and now, the blood race was using him as a breakthrough point, so he was naturally angry. But he was a body cultivator, and in such a situation, he was really the breakthrough point. Even if he was angry, it was useless. Zhao Yunlu and Yu Yaorao's flying swords and techniques were flying at the same time. Both of them were going all out because they knew that they only had a short time. Once the fight started, the nearby blood race might be aware of it. So, if they wanted to kill this blood race who was alone, they could only do it quickly. But what made the two of them extremely surprised was that this blood race's blood cloud was too tough. From the feedback of their techniques and flying swords, it seemed that what they were attacking was not a blood cloud, but a piece of extremely tough candy. Chapter 1247. This made Zhao Yunlu feel very incredulous. It was undeniable that the blood tribe was indeed hard to kill when they had the protection of the blood river technique, but it shouldn't be so tough. For a moment, he actually wasn't sure if there was any mistake in his information. The ordinary blood river technique naturally wouldn't have such great toughness. As the blood tribe's secret technique that combined cultivation techniques into one, the blood river technique could be used for both offense and defense, and it was ever-changing. However, everything had its pros and cons. It was precisely because the Blood Tribe's power was spread out that the defense of the Blood River technique wasn't that strong. It was just that it was very difficult for the Blood Tribe to be discovered if they were hiding inside, so it could provide them with a kind of protection in disguise. Zhao Yunlu and the others were responding normally. As long as they continued to attack like this, they would naturally be able to continuously weaken the Blood River technique until the Blood Tribe hiding inside had nowhere to hide, and they would be able to kill them. There was nothing wrong with the method, but this was the blood cloud controlled by Lu Yi. He could set up a formation in the blood cloud as he wished. A protective formation constructed with defensive and foundation-strengthening spirit patterns as the core could negate the enemy's attacks to a large extent. Although the formation would collapse at a touch because it didn't have a sturdy formation base, it could be repaired with just a thought. Hence, the actual situation was that the attacks of Zhao Yunlu and the others had destroyed the formation constructed by Lu Yi, but it didn't deplete the blood cloud too much. This gave them the feeling that the blood cloud was extremely tough. This was a method that no one could imitate, not even the Blood Tribe themselves. Even if there were people who were proficient in formations among them, who could guarantee that they could create a formation with just a thought. Lu Yi could because the core spirit patterns of his formation wouldn't risk failure. With just a thought, the spirit patterns would be formed. Rumble, 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 the blood cloud with a radius of 100 feet swept past in midair. The three figures surrounded it, and they were like leeches that wouldn't let go. During this period of time, their attacks didn't stop. Suddenly, an aura rapidly swept over from not far away. Their divine senses were firmly locked onto Lu Ye's blood cloud, indicating that they were prepared to deal with him. Ding Yu was overjoyed. He knew that there were other cultivators lying in wait nearby, all waiting for someone to take the lead. As expected, when the battle started, someone couldn't help but jump out. In this location and time, the Blood Tribe was the common enemy of all cultivators. It was rare to encounter a lone Blood Tribe member, so it was naturally a situation where everyone wanted to fight. It could be foreseen that as the battle progressed, more and more people would be attracted to join their camp. This was undoubtedly good news for them. Currently, the scattered cultivators lacked a place to gather. The sudden appearance of a lone Blood Tribe member provided them with a very good opportunity. However, at this moment, a huge patch of blood red suddenly appeared on the horizon and quickly spread towards them. Yu Yaorao's expression sank, and she cried out in a delicate voice, "Not good, the Blood Clan over there has detected it." The ones who had rushed over were the Blood Tribe troops that they had observed earlier. There were about 5 or 6 Blood Tribe cultivators, and they had set up a line of defense that spanned 100,000 kilometers in this area. They swept back and forth, and no cultivator who was caught in the crossfire was spared. The vampires had at least 2 such squads, but they were stationed in other locations. Since they had discovered something, the cultivator who had suddenly jumped out and was about to join them had naturally discovered it as well. This fellow was quick to react and immediately turned around and fled far away. "Let's go!" Ding Yu shouted. Since they couldn't kill this lone Blood Tribe member, they could only retreat first. Otherwise, once they were entangled by the Blood Tribe troops, none of them would be able to leave. Although he shouted, he didn't retreat immediately. As a body cultivator, he always had the responsibility to protect his teammates, even if it was just a temporary opponent. This was the awareness that all body cultivators had. Therefore, before his teammates left, he wouldn't expose his back to the enemy. Yu Yaorao made a prompt decision to retreat, but Zhao Yunlu didn't retreat. His flying sword was still as swift and fierce as before, and he madly slashed at the blood cloud. It seemed like he wanted to get rid of this Blood Tribe member before the Blood Tribe's reinforcements arrived. "Go!" Ding Yu shouted angrily. If they didn't leave now, it would really be too late. In terms of speed, a body cultivator like him couldn't be compared to a Blood Tribe member. Once he was entangled, Zhao Yunlu might be able to escape with his flying sword, but he wouldn't be able to escape no matter what. Only when he shouted for the second time, Zhao Yunlu unwillingly slashed out the last shocking sword ray, then turned around and fled, turning into a sword ray. Only then did Ding Yu retreat, but his heart was in his throat. He was afraid that the blood cloud would suddenly swell up and swallow him. If that really happened, then he would be in trouble. Fortunately, this kind of thing didn't happen. Only when he had escaped to a relatively safe distance did he turn around and madly flee. The blood cloud chased after him for a while but to no avail, and could only helplessly stop. After a short while, a huge sea of blood quickly spread out from the distance, connecting the sky and the earth with great momentum. Wherever such a sea of blood passed, any cultivator hiding would have nowhere to hide. This was also the blood tribe's method of searching for enemies, and there would always be some unexpected gains. In the blood cloud, Lu Yi quietly sensed. He was clearly aware that the guidance he had felt before was coming from this sea of blood that was approaching him. Sure enough, just as he had guessed, it wasn't that some great treasure belonging to the blood tribe had appeared, but that the other cultivators of the blood tribe had used some strange secret technique that allowed their blood rivers to have some wonderful resonance even if they were separated by a great distance. This was probably the reason why the blood tribe could gather together. Lu Yi was excited, but he didn't show it on his face. He even constructed a pseudo-prestige spirit rune for himself to disguise his cultivation as a ninth-order divine sea realm cultivator. In the sea of blood, he could hide his appearance with the help of the blood-red color, but he couldn't hide his cultivation fluctuations, especially for the blood tribe who were also proficient in blood arts. Then, he urged his blood cloud to collide with the huge sea of blood and instantly merged with it without any hindrance. This was obviously the other party's way of accepting his arrival. No matter which world they were from, or the starry sky, all blood tribe members were one family. This was the consensus of the blood tribe. Not only the blood tribe, but most of the other races were like this. Only the human race was an exception. Originally, after accepting Lu Yi, this group of blood tribe cultivators was going to chase after the human race cultivators who had just appeared. After all, this was a rare opportunity. Now that many cultivators had gone into hiding, even if they searched the surrounding 100,000 kilometers, it wouldn't be easy to find anything. Since they had encountered one, there was naturally no reason to let him go. But when Lu Yi merged with the blood cloud into the huge sea of blood, all the blood tribe cultivators couldn't help but be stunned. They all froze in place, and even the huge sea of blood was turbulent, as if it could collapse at any time. It couldn't be helped, as every blood tribe cultivator felt an extremely rich and condensed saint nature, and this saint nature brought a great suppression. A deathly silence ensued. Every blood tribe cultivator was familiar with the concept of holiness. However, in their respective realms, only those who had reached a certain level of cultivation would be bestowed with the blood of holiness and condense it. Thus, even though they were all outstanding figures in their respective realms, only one of them had refined a drop of holiness blood. Fundamentally speaking, the other four were only ordinary blood tribe cultivators and not saint seeds. This included Zhou Fang's, who Lu Yi had killed before, which was why he didn't obtain any saint blood. The situation in their world was different from the blood refining world. Because of the level of the world, the blood refining world couldn't produce constellation realm cultivators, so divine sea realm cultivators reigned supreme. After countless years, many saint seeds were born. However, their world had constellation realm cultivators, moon jade realm cultivators, and sunshine realm cultivators. Without enough cultivation and aptitude, it was impossible for them to obtain saint blood. Even for those moon jade realm cultivators, not every blood tribe cultivator had refined saint blood. This thing was very rare in their world, and every drop was extremely precious. But no matter what, they had personally experienced saint nature from their own elders. They thought that the saint nature of their elders was strong and rich enough, but compared to it, they realized that what they had felt before was nothing at all. If the saint nature of their elders was like a spring breeze and a drizzle, then what was happening now was like a violent storm. Under such great deterrence, not to mention the four ordinary blood tribe cultivators, even the one and only saint seed was shaken, unable to control himself. Under such circumstances, how could they be in the mood to chase after a fleeing human? They thought that they had encountered a companion who was alone and bullied, but who knew that the other party would suddenly become the ruler of the blood tribe. In this world, how could there be a divine sea realm cultivator with such rich saint nature? Holiness was something that could not be faked. They could feel it clearly. After a long silence, the only blood tribe cultivator who had refined Saint Blood spoke in an extremely respectful tone. "Fellow cultivator, may I ask which realm you are from?" Lu Yi also knew that he had an advantage against the blood tribe, so naturally he would not be too polite. He replied coldly, "Li Tai Bai of the blood tribe." After another long silence, another voice sounded weakly in the blood sea. "Over at the blood tribe, isn't fellow cultivator Zhou Sifang participating in this grand event?" This fellow seemed to know Zhou Sifang, which was not strange. Previously on the platform, the powerhouses of his realm had interacted with the powerhouses of the blood tribe. As a junior following behind his elder, he had also met Zhou Sifang. This was also why Lu Yi had deliberately asked about Zhou Sifang's background when he killed him. Since he wanted to make a fuss about the blood tribe, he naturally had to have some background. His knowledge of the blood tribe was limited to the blood tribe, so he could only ask about Zhou Sifang's background. In the face of such doubts, Lu Yi already had an answer. He said indifferently, "I have been in seclusion before, and when I came out, it just so happened that this grand event happened, so I took that trash's place. Is there a problem?" No. How could there be a problem? Saint Nature reigns supreme in the blood tribe, and the powerful Saint Nature that Lu Yi displayed at this moment was enough to dispel all doubts. End of chapter. Chapter 1248. The few vampires would never have thought that there was actually a human in this world who could far surpass their elders in terms of holiness. Generation. As for Lu Yi calling Zhou Fangfang trash, the few vampires didn't dare to say anything. With such a powerful holiness, under the premise of cultivation, any vampire would probably be trash in front of him, including the few of them. They didn't dare to speak, but Lu Yi continued to look down on them. This bloodline summoning secret technique is quite new. Who did you use it on? Although the few of them were somewhat puzzled as to why Lu Yi would ask such a strange question, they still didn't dare to not answer. The holy seed that had refined the holy blood replied, "This is the blood cry technique. Has fellow Taoist never cultivated it before?" Bloodline inheritances were basically all collected. Of course, there were tens of thousands of bloodline inheritances. There were many kinds of elephants, but there were always some geniuses in every generation. The successor station would develop or improve some blood skills that had special uses. This was not something that could be obtained through the bloodline inheritance. "I'm the one asking you." Lu Yi was still very calm. He knew that it was difficult to say that he would expose himself at such a close distance. He probably wouldn't be able to deceive others for too long, so he couldn't be too obedient in his actions. Now that he had such a strong holy power, he probably wouldn't be able to deceive others for too long. Now that they were intimidated by their powerful holiness, they should take advantage of the situation. It would be inappropriate to show too much weakness in this aspect. The few vampires felt bitter in their hearts. They felt that this clansman didn't seem to put them in his eyes at all, but they could only feel bitter. All right, if they had such terrifying holiness, they probably wouldn't be any better. The only holy seed replied respectfully, "The blood cry technique was created by a senior from the blood heart realm more than 1,000 years ago. It was specially created to sense the bloodline of the vampires. It's just right to use it here. The few of us can basically use it because the elders of all the realms have it. Teach it." So that's how it is. Lu Yi looked as if he had suddenly realized something. "I've been cultivating in seclusion before, so I didn't pay attention to the outside world. I only focused on studying the mysteries of bloodline inheritances, but I didn't want to miss these. It's a pity that I have to look for those few when I go back this time. Senior, please teach me a thing or two." A vampire immediately said, "If fellow Taoist wants to learn, you don't have to wait until we go back. We can explain it to you now. It's not a complicated secret art. What do you think, fellow Taoist?" Lu Yi nodded. "All right." The blood clan member immediately explained the various subtleties of the blood whaling technique. It was indeed not a very exquisite secret technique, just a kind of blood technique. As long as one had some foundation, they would be able to quickly understand how to use it in a different way. In less than an incense stick's worth of time, Lu Yi had mastered the blood cry technique. This caused the Blood Clan members to frantically flatter him. Even the only holy seed was no exception. Fellow Taoist, you are indeed talented and intelligent. I spent a total of 3 days practicing the blood cry technique. Even so, the elders of this realm are full of praise for you. It took me 5 days. It took me 7 days. He didn't know if what they said was true or false. Anyway, it was definitely not wrong to say that the time was longer. Lu Yi shook his body and activated his holiness. The few blood breeds immediately kept quiet out of fear, not knowing if their flattery had backfired. I don't know who was in charge before. Now that I'm here, I'll be in charge. Who agrees and who disagrees? This huge blood sea was the fusion of several Blood Clan members' blood river technique. Since it was a fusion, there must be one in charge and the others assisting. Only then could the full power of the fused blood sea be unleashed. Otherwise, it would only be chaos. He had learned the blood cry technique. All that was left was to think of a way to deal with these Blood Clan members. Therefore, he had to be in charge. Naturally, it wouldn't be so troublesome to deal with one Blood Clan member. However, there were 5 Blood Clan members here. He had to make sure that he could catch all of them in one fell swoop and not let them leak the news. He had to kill them fast enough and not give them time to react. We have no objections. The only holy seed was the first to speak. The other Blood Clan members all agreed. Who would dare to have any objections? His Holiness was right there. To be safe, the holy seed asked weakly, Fellow Taoist Li, may I ask if you've cultivated the holy convergence technique? It wasn't that he was being cautious. It was just that he had learned from the mistakes of others. This person who came had not even cultivated the blood cry technique. He might have not even cultivated the holy convergence technique. To be on the safe side, he still had to ask. Sure enough, that person asked in confusion, what is the holy convergence technique? The holy seed explained patiently. Lu Yi slowly understood. It was a secret technique developed by the Blood Clan experts. It was easy for ordinary Blood Clan members to form an alliance because they didn't have the holy convergence technique. With the holy convergence technique, there was no problem of anyone suppressing anyone. As long as they knew their priorities when they joined forces, there wouldn't be any trouble. However, the holy seeds couldn't. Unless the holy seeds had the same holy convergence technique, there would be a difference in strength. If they joined forces, the holy convergence technique would be weak. It would be difficult for the weaker party to exert their full strength. It would be better not to join forces. Lu Yi had killed so many holy seeds in the blood refining realm, but he rarely encountered a situation where the holy seeds would join forces. The first time, 2 holy seeds used some kind of secret technique to superimpose their holy convergence technique in a futile attempt to compete with him. The result was naturally to hatch a tree. At that time, his holy convergence technique was already very strong. It wasn't something that 2 holy seeds superimposed their holy convergence technique could compete with. The other time was the final battle on the Jade Pillar Peak. But that time, the blood spirit caused trouble and merged with all the Blood Clan members who were still alive at that time. The power of the holy seeds didn't count. It was difficult for the holy seeds to join forces, and it was even more difficult for the holy seeds to join forces with ordinary Blood Clan members. There was bound to be a problem of suppression. To solve this problem, some Blood Clan experts devoted themselves to research and developed the holy convergence technique. This technique had no other effect when used. Its function was to suppress the holy seed's holy convergence technique. Because it was an automatic suppression, it was easy to use, and the effect was very good. In this way, different Blood Clan members could join forces without fear of being suppressed. After all, the suppression of the holy convergence technique could only be used within the Blood Clan. When dealing with enemies of other clans, the holy convergence technique was useless. On the contrary, it would have the opposite effect. There were 5 Blood Clan members here, and one of them was a holy seed. The reason why they could join forces happily was that the holy convergence technique was used by the holy convergence technique. It was because the holy convergence technique had restrained its holy convergence technique. Since he could use it, he had naturally cultivated it. The other 4 Blood Clan members didn't have this ability. Needless to say, he followed that blood clan member and cultivated the holy convergence technique. Lu Yi admired the research spirit of the blood clan experts. Their bloodline inheritance allowed them to master many profound blood techniques. But they were still trying to innovate. This was also the reason why a clan could remain strong. He intended to cultivate the blood cry technique, even if it was just a few drops of blood. Even if the blood clan didn't mention it, he still wanted to find a way to learn it. This holy convergence technique was an unexpected gain. If he encountered blood clan members in the future, he could use this holy convergence technique to do more things. Unlike now, when he used the blood art as long as he was a blood clan member. This was because the holy convergence technique was so powerful that it made people tremble in fear. However, without the holy convergence technique, even a blood clan member would find it difficult to determine whether he was a blood clan member or not. There were other blood clan members who could use the blood art, especially some of the law cultivators among the human race. This cultivation session took half a day. The holy convergence technique was undoubtedly more complicated than the blood cry technique, but the blood clan members didn't show any impatience. This was especially true for the holy seed, which had been teaching them attentively. While Lu Yi was cultivating the saint restraining technique, a huge sea of blood was floating in the air. As long as the nearby cultivators didn't, even a blind person could see it. However, no one dared to touch it. They were all waiting for the right opportunity. As Lu Yi cultivated the holy convergence technique, his holy convergence technique slowly converged and finally disappeared completely. Only then did the atmosphere in the sea of blood become relaxed and cheerful. To the blood clan members, this half a day was equivalent to carrying a huge mountain on their backs. The huge pressure made it difficult for them to breathe. Now that their holy convergence technique was gone, they immediately felt much more relaxed. Don't move around. I'll fuse with the sea of blood. Lu Yi instructed as he urged his own blood cloud to spread out in all directions. Although he had barged into the sea of blood earlier, he had been using the blood cloud with a radius of 10 feet to protect himself. The main reason was that once the sea of blood merged with each other, the blood clan member would be able to identify his true body through the feedback of the sea of blood. He was also proficient in the blood art. How could Lu Yi not be aware of this? On guard? Now that he had learned what he needed to learn, there was nothing to worry about. Naturally, he had to show his true colors. As he urged his blood chi to spread in all directions, it gradually filled every corner of the sea of blood. In order to prevent the blood clan members from spying on him, he deliberately did not fuse with the blood chi of these blood clan members. The fusion between the blood chi of the blood clan members was still very simple. There was nothing too complicated about it. He just needed to grasp a certain degree, especially the blood clan member in charge. The stronger he was, the larger the sea of blood he could control. That was why the blood tribe members participating in the Battle of the Divine Ocean were split into several teams. This was to ensure that they could obtain more loot. It was because once there were too many people, no one would be able to control it. After the fusion of the sea of blood, a team of 5 or 6 people was the best choice. At this stage, such a team did not dare to say that they were invincible, but there was basically no one who could match them. Things progressed very smoothly. Because he had been watching, the blood clan members obediently stood in place and did not move. This also minimized the risk of him being exposed to the greatest extent. It was not until the entire sea of blood was in his hands that Lu Ye's figure flashed and he rushed toward the blood clan member closest to him. At the same time, the remaining blood chi around the blood clan member was also rapidly fusing with him. The blood clan members were not too prepared for Lu Ye's actions. This was because of their preconceived notions. They all thought that Lu Yi was a blood clan member. Lu Yi was one of his clansmen. It wasn't until Lu Yi got closer and closer that the vampire felt a trace of doubt. Is this person trying to get close to me? Chapter 1249. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, a massive pressure descended from the sky. Caught off guard, the blood tribe member's body went limp and he almost fell to the ground. He hurriedly shouted, "Fellow Taoist Li, He wasn't the only one who felt this way. The other blood tribe members all felt the same way. The originally stable blood sea began to tremble violently, as if it was about to collapse. Lu Yi said, "My apologies. This is my first time using the holy restraining technique, so I'm still not too familiar with it." As he apologized, he arrived in front of the blood tribe member. He raised his saber, which was reinforced by sharp inscriptions, and slashed down. Just as he made his move, another blood tribe member's avatar suddenly appeared behind him. Sword chi surged out from his sword gourd and quickly condensed into a streak of sword light, which shot towards the blood tribe member's back. The massive blood sea began to tremble even more violently. The two auras of life were extinguished at almost the same time. The other three blood tribe members vaguely sensed something, but due to the suppression of the holy attribute and the turbulence of the blood sea, they were unable to determine what was going on. The holy seed was still shouting, "Fellow Taoist, please withdraw your holy attribute." Lu Ye's voice drifted over from the other side. "I'll withdraw it right away. Don't be impatient." Due to the color of their skin, the blood tribe members' faces were originally red, but now, their faces were pale. Now, no one was standing out to teach them how to be human. Naturally, they were being petty. Even though the weak humans were being petty, the weak members of the other races were also having a hard time comparing themselves. The 7 members of the Blood Clan also knew that they had been flaunting their prowess for a long time under that line of defense. However, at this moment, all of them were in disarray. Many gazes inadvertently looked in the direction of these weaklings from the Blood Clan's realm. Sure enough, they saw many ugly faces. This was quite logical. Everyone knew how treacherous the Blood Tribe's secret techniques were. With 7 Blood Tribe members moving together, unless they had twice as many people as they did, there was no way they could fight back, let alone kill them. Furthermore, there was a figure that looked exactly like Li Taibai missing from the Blood Sea. Our Blood Seas hadn't completely merged yet, and I was able to peek at Ranshur's true appearance through the feedback from the Blood Seas. That was a crucial moment, and I was truly shocked. That was because Li Taibai, whom we Blood Clan members had recognized as our comrade, actually had the face of a human. Even if one participated in the struggle for the Divine Sea, even if the rankings showed the number of enemies killed, everyone knew that the number of enemies killed by those at the bottom of the rankings was very small. It was even possible that the number of enemies killed by those at the bottom of the rankings was the same. It was just a matter of time. Everyone knew that the blood race didn't have a secret technique and couldn't link up with each other. At that point in time, they would act as a group and kill cultivators from various races. Knowing this was one thing, but there wasn't a very bad way to deal with it. Lu Yi plundered the spoils of war with a complicated expression, but as before, he destroyed the corpses and destroyed the evidence. After the ranking of the Spirit Sea realm, such a situation had happened once. Now it was happening again. His mind was in a state of chaos as all kinds of thoughts appeared in his mind. For a moment, he didn't have the time to think deeply. He just instinctively wanted to escape inside. Dealing with 7 members of the Blood Clan at once was definitely the work of me alone. This lowly one must have joined forces with the weaker members of the other clans. No one made such a guess. The instant I asked that question, my expression changed slightly. Humans? Pieces. The result was naturally tragic. With my strength greatly suppressed, it was difficult for me to use my full strength. 7. They're all ranked between 70 and 80. These lowly Sun Reflection Realm cultivators and Moon Jade Realm cultivators naturally didn't need to be so shocked. However, those present weren't the weaklings. Even fewer were Lu Ye and the others who had come with their elders to broaden their horizons. Even though they didn't understand how a human could have such a weak holy attribute, and even more so, they didn't understand where this human had come from. However, I knew that if I wanted to live, I had to escape as soon as possible. As this huge commotion spread, the words, Divine Sea Realm, which had originally been ranked 4th, suddenly dropped by a small chunk. It was now ranked 8th. In just 2 breaths of time, he died on the spot. Now that I was suppressed by the holy attribute, I could only use 70% of my strength. 7 of my companions were still alive. If I hurried to leave, I would only follow in their footsteps. The whispers below the platform stopped. This Divine Sea Realm cultivator had suddenly dropped a few ranks. If he had killed a few opponents, then the question was, who had died? As the blade slashed down, the clone let out a short cry of surprise. In such a close-range attack, the clone's techniques weren't as good as the main body's, so there was a small gap. However, it wasn't a big problem. Thus, everyone soon realized that this was normal. Without the support of the other 7 members of the Blood Clan, even Lu Yi wouldn't be able to control the Sea of Blood. As the Blood Clan members died, the Sea of Blood rapidly shrank. In the end, only Lu Ye's Sea of Blood remained. Gong, in reality, I couldn't see the battle within the absolute beginning realm. I could only see the changes in the rankings. Originally, I was like a fish in water in the Blood Sea, but now, it was as if I had stepped into a swamp, and it was difficult for me to take even a single step. I had only run a short distance when Lu Ye's true body and clone blocked my path. In fact, it was difficult to see. I just needed to see which cultivator's name had disappeared. As for the details of the Divine Sea Realm cultivator, the tens of thousands of people present didn't have a basic understanding. However, there was a way. The only 4th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivator was difficult to notice. Moreover, my success or failure was directly related to the ownership of a 4-star artifact bead. Although there were still very few names on the left and right pillars, among the cultivators here, whose cultivation was the highest, Lu Yi, the disappearance of names was obvious at a glance. But generally speaking, those who were ranked at the bottom of the last 100 rankings would have the same frequency of changes as those who were ranked at the top. The further up they were, the less changes there would be. On the contrary, those who were ranked at the bottom had the least changes, especially those who were ranked at the bottom 70. Often, there would be no changes for a long time. Even if there were no changes, they would rise or fall a rank. But jumping from 4th to 8th in one go meant that they had killed more than one person. This made the cultivators of the human race feel very slow. They all felt that the Divine Sea Realm cultivators had killed cultivators of the same race to increase their ranks. Although it was understandable, it was still within the rules, but it still caused a small resonance. How slow! Let's strengthen the might of your human race. The 7 blood race cultivators who were originally ranked between 70 and 80 suddenly disappeared without a trace. In the competition between those monstrous geniuses, it should be said that one person could crush several others. Not to mention the 4 heavens realm, even the monstrous geniuses from the top realms were likely unable to do such a thing. As expected of a Saint Seed, his decision was very slow. But before Lu Yi took control of the Blood Sea, how could it be so difficult for me to escape? However, before a month passed, the rate at which those names disappeared had clearly slowed down. As for the rankings of the last 100 on the left, they rose and fell even more frequently. No one had suddenly dropped a few ranks, and no one's name had suddenly disappeared. Even though they were here, young Master Zhu and Lu Ye could feel the dangers of the Alpha Origin realm. During this period, only the Divine Sea Realm cultivator from the 4 heavens realm disappeared. It was unknown what he had done, but in the past few days, he had fallen another rank and was now ranked 4th. But that kind of thing had really happened. In the following month, there were no more rankings under the left pillar, but there were no more than 8,000 names under the right pillar. The disappearance of the names of these weak cultivators was very slow, with only a few hundred names disappearing in an entire month. From afar, the cultivators of the various races who didn't see this scene all understood the reason. Because the battle after that had broken out in the Blood Sea, without the cover of the Blood Sea, both the sounds of the battle and the deaths of the blood race cultivators were extremely loud. Those cultivators were also very far away, so they naturally had a way to sense the lake. As for his 7 companions, they had not been completely annihilated yet. Everyone felt the threat of Mo Shao. Such a change in the battle of the Divine Sea Realm was a bad thing for all the realms, because it was extremely unlikely that the seniors of their own realms would bump into a Divine Sea Realm cultivator. If they were to underestimate a 4th Order cultivator, it would be a disaster for them. The Saint Seed Mask finally felt that something was wrong and hurriedly called out, What is fellow Taoists doing? Although the weak cultivators weren't startled, they were still very shocked, and their expressions turned cold. I'm just a fourth-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator. How can I kill so many opponents in an instant? One had to know that those who had retreated were the top cultivators of their respective realms, Lu Yi. No matter how weak they were still weaker than Ran Shifu. However, they didn't dare to act rashly, lest they expose themselves and attract the blood race's attention. They were all still dormant, hoping that others would restrain themselves. They would act according to the circumstances. Under the white jade platform of the reincarnation tree, almost at the same time that Lu Yi killed the 7 blood race cultivators, the entire platform was in an uproar. It's the blood race. Only a few of the blood race cultivators' names disappeared. In other words, the 7 blood race cultivators didn't die at the hands of a Divine Sea Realm cultivator, and the number was correct. For 1,000 years, the blood race had relied on this method to gain nothing in the Alpha Origin realm. But killing blood race cultivators was the same. I still shrank it into a blood cloud of 10 meters in radius and slowly moved in a certain direction. We were limited by our strength and cultivation, so we weren't qualified to participate in the battle for the Divine Sea Realm. After that, we wouldn't have any more opportunities and could only stay outside to watch. Every time there was a change in the rankings, it meant a fierce battle. The disappearance of every name represented the death or defeat of a realm's monstrous genius. We were now wondering why the originally small blood sea had shrunk to such a large size before losing a single blood race cultivator. The weak cultivators of various realms knew exactly what happened inside the Alpha Origin realm, but even if a Divine Sea Realm cultivator didn't have the ability to fight 7 blood race cultivators alone and kill them all, there was no explanation. It wasn't that I didn't have many helpers around me. Chapter 1250. This was also the most logical guess. However, there was one thing that puzzled everyone. If this was really the case, then why didn't his helpers manage to kill anyone? Why did he manage to do it all the time? Wasn't he trying to steal the kill? So many people had worked together, yet he was the only one who managed to reap the rewards. Had everyone else's efforts all been for naught? This brat wasn't a good person. Lu Ye's performance not only shocked the elites of the various large realms, but even Yang Qing was somewhat stunned. Although he had been sealed in the Spirit Stream battlefield for tens of thousands of years, because of his own strength, and because of the passage of time, the power of the seal had also weakened. Thus, he was aware of many things in the 9 states, especially when it came to Lu Yi. When Lu Ye's cultivation was only at the Spirit Stream realm, Yang Qing had already paid attention to him. He more or less knew what Lu Yi was capable of. This was also why he had brought Lu Yi to the reincarnation tree. This was because he felt that with Lu Ye's foundation and ability, even if his cultivation was slightly lower than others, he was completely qualified to occupy a spot in the top 100. Before Lu Yi left, he had only asked him to enter the top 10. It was only a high expectation, and he didn't really expect him to enter the top 10. In Yang Qing's estimation, it would be very good if Lu Yi could occupy a spot in the top 20. This wasn't that he looked down on Lu Yi, but rather that those freakish geniuses from the top realms couldn't be underestimated. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated this brat's ability. How had he managed to kill 5 members of the blood tribe in one go? Even if someone had really helped him, why did he have to take all the kills, and no one else had any objections? Yang Qing had a rough idea of the abilities that Lu Yi had displayed in the 9 states. However, Yang Qing hadn't been aware of the abilities that he had cultivated in the blood refining realm. Naturally, he didn't know that Lu Yi had a huge natural advantage against the blood tribe. If he had known, he wouldn't have had such doubts. While the commotion and exclamations on the white jade platform continued, Lu Yi had already set off for the next batch of blood tribe members. His main body appeared, while his doppelganger moved stealthily. After mastering the blood cry technique, it was extremely easy to find the blood breeds. This was because the blood breeds would activate the blood cry technique from time to time when they were on the move in order to gather more of their kind. At this point in time, most of the vampires had already gathered. Only 2 or 3 of them were still wandering outside. Due to various reasons, they couldn't rush over for the time being. The vampires who had gathered would use the blood cry technique from time to guide the vampires who were alone. The blood race probably never imagined that the blood cry technique, originally developed for the Divine Sea battle of the Alpha origin stage, would become their fatal flaw. There was a price to pay for everything. The blood race had relied on this secret technique to roam freely in the Alpha origin stage for 1,000 years. They would finally pay the price this time, a price so painful that they could not accept it. After another encounter with the blood tribe, they were able to meet up smoothly. What happened next was simple. Under the display of their divine nature, the blood tribe members were all submissive and opened up their control over the blood sea, allowing Lu Yi to merge with them. The same thing happened again, and this time, it was 5 blood race members. On the White Jade platform, there was another uproar and exclamation because Lu Yi's ranking had suddenly risen by several places. In less than half a day, he had once again overtaken everyone and reached the top in one fell swoop. An 8th Order Divine Sea participating in the Alpha origin stage was already eye-catching enough. The visual impact of climbing to the top of the list was unimaginable. Below Lu Yi's name, the top 50 names were almost all monstrous geniuses from top-level worlds. He was the only one who came from a large world. So far, no one knew where the 9 Heavens realm was. After the same scene happened a second time, many masters began to search for the names that had disappeared from the list out of habit. Although everyone had some faint guesses, when they confirmed that their guesses were true, they still couldn't believe it. Because the names that had disappeared from the list were all from the blood race. What was going on? Lu Yi from the 9 Heavens realm didn't do anything else but focus on killing the blood race? He wasn't satisfied with killing 5 before, and now he had killed another 5. Looking at the faces of the blood race masters, they were so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. Moreover, how did he do it? When the names of the first 5 blood race names disappeared, many people guessed that Lu Yi should have a lot of helpers around him. Those monstrous geniuses from various worlds were probably fed up with the arrogance of the blood race, so they joined forces to resist. In the end, Lu Yi took advantage of them and stole their kills. But at this time, if they still thought so, they would be brainless. No matter how good he was at stealing kills, it was impossible for him to steal all the kills. The monstrous geniuses from other worlds weren't fools. Every kill was related to the final ranking, so how could they allow such a thing to happen? So, the biggest possibility was Lu Yi's own ability. Perhaps he had a method to restrain the blood race? When this idea appeared, many masters became excited. If there really was such a method, then the blood race was in for a bad time. They could use it as a reference. In the future, when they wandered the starry sky, once they encountered a blood race master, wouldn't they be able to do whatever they wanted? The powerhouses of the blood race had also realized this problem. Their gazes, intentionally or otherwise, turned toward Yang Qing. Some of them suspected that Lu Yi had received guidance from this person. But how much threat could an 8th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivator pose to the blood race, even if he received guidance? Moreover, the blood race didn't have any fatal weaknesses to take advantage of. It was a total loss. But it was undeniable that with the 2 huge changes in Lu Yi's ranking, many of the cultivators on the White Jade platform became excited. Originally, they could only watch the rise and fall of the rankings, but in fact, they couldn't see much. But things were different now. Almost everyone's eyes were fixed on the list on the right. Everyone wanted to know when these names would disappear. If these names really disappeared, it meant that Lu Yi from the 9 Heavens realm was really targeting the blood race. Outside the White Jade platform, Du Lang was completely dumbfounded. Originally, when the top 100 list was released, Lu Yi's 11th place was enough to shock him, but he didn't expect him to run to 7th place. Although he slowly fell to 8th place, in the blink of an eye, he rushed to 3rd place and then to the top. At this time he really had some doubts. Was this Lu Yi the same person he met in the Spirit Jade Lode? He didn't have any doubts before because his birth and name matched. But now, it was difficult to not have doubts. It was really too unbelievable. "Nephew, your friend is in the top 100, if there are no accidents later," the old man from the Red Sky continent said while stroking his beard. Being in first place for the time being meant that he had a great harvest. Even if he didn't have any more, as long as he didn't die, he wouldn't fall off the list. Because in the previous battle of the Divine Sea, as long as one had 5 harvests and could survive until the end of the Battle of the Divine Sea, they could occupy a place in the top 100. Liu Ye had more than 5 harvests? He had far surpassed that. Du Lang frowned. I'm afraid that the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Being in the limelight now wasn't necessarily a good thing, because there was another rule in the Battle of the Divine Sea. When the number of people decreased to a certain extent, the reincarnation tree would give all the cultivators who were still alive a certain degree of inspiration, marking the positions of the cultivators at the top and bottom of the rankings. For generations, those who ranked at the top of the list were basically the exclusive property of the top realms. An unknown cultivator of the 8th Order Divine Sea realm reaching first place would only attract countless covetous and greedy eyes. 1. Because the higher the ranking, the more benefits one could obtain in the future. Those monstrous geniuses from top realms, even if not for themselves, would compete for first place in the list for their own realms. When the time came, they would inevitably target Liu Ye. When it came to the final moment, even if they were both from the human race, those monstrous geniuses wouldn't show any mercy. He barely had some friendship with Liu Ye, but because of his own reasons, Du Lang had to withdraw from this competition midway. He really wanted to see Liu Ye, who also came from a small place, have the last laugh. This was also why he insisted on watching here. Otherwise, he would have already returned to the Scarlet Sky continent with his elders. Right now, it seemed that Liu Ye's momentum was strong, but he might not be able to last long because his current glory was obtained by beheading the blood race. In other words, he was stepping on the bones of the blood race. He had the means to deal with the blood race, but he might not have the means to deal with the monstrous geniuses from other races. Less than half of the 3-month period had passed, and there were still many variables. Du Lang could only hope that this friend could persevere. Even if he didn't firmly hold on to the first place as long as he was alive, he would definitely win. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, half a day later, a burst of cheers suddenly came from the White Jade platform. It was all from the Spirit Sea Realm cultivators who came with their elders to watch the fun. Because things were developing according to everyone's expectations. Just now, a few names suddenly disappeared from the list in front of the right doorpost, and those names were all from the blood race. At this point, the blood race cultivators participating in the Alpha Origin realm from the various great realms were almost completely wiped out. Perhaps there were 2 or 3 fish that escaped the net, but they were no longer a threat. Liu Ye from the Nine Heavens realm really did have a special ability to deal with the blood race. That was why he could kill so many blood race monstrous geniuses with his 8th Order Divine Sea realm cultivation. This caused the various great realms to fiercely breathe a sigh of relief. For 1,000 years, no one had a good way to deal with the blood race's shameless methods, but who would have thought that this time, a little guy would appear and almost exterminate the blood race. This naturally made the various great realms gloat, and they all lamented that the heavenly way was indeed good, and that the heavens would spare anyone. Chapter 1251. A group of blood race experts from different domains gathered together with ugly expressions. From time to time, they would glance in Yang Qing's direction. If it weren't for the fact that the 9-star treasure Yang Qing had taken out was too shocking, the blood race experts would have already gone up to investigate the other party's background. The blood race was a large race in the universe. How could they tolerate being targeted by a human? Most importantly, the other party really did have a method to deal with them. Even the blood race experts didn't know what that method was. If such a method were to become widespread, where would the blood race find shelter in the vast universe in the future? They would be targeted wherever they went. After all, the blood race had many enemies. We have to find a way to capture that brat after the Battle of the Divine Sea. We have to find out what he did no matter what. A blood race expert suggested. Another blood race expert shook his head. We might have a chance if this was the universe, but this is the reincarnation tree. How can we capture him? I'm afraid we'll be expelled by the reincarnation tree the moment we make a move. Can't we just watch? There's nothing we can do except watch. We have to give it a try. The group of blood race experts were all having headaches. They really didn't have a good solution to the current situation. After a long while, one of the blood race experts looked at the oldest and most silent one. Elder Qin, what do you think? The old blood race expert snorted. What's the hurry? There's no use being anxious if you can't enter the alpha origin stage. He paused for a moment and sneered. The little guys in the alpha origin stage will only be more anxious than us. A clever blood race expert immediately understood and slapped his thigh. Yeah, what's the hurry? If that brat still maintains his first place in the later stages of the Battle of the Divine Sea, even if he's not first place, as long as he's in the top 10, someone will definitely deal with him. Even if he has some method to restrain us blood race cultivators, his cultivation is inferior. He'll definitely be no match for the other races. The eyes of the other blood race experts gradually lit up. They turned to look at the pillar on the right side of the door. Below the first place Lu Ye's name were the names of the monsters from the top realms. Indeed, they didn't need to do anything. All they needed to do was wait. Naturally, someone would take care of Lu Ye. As long as Lu Ye was dead, their biggest worry would disappear. For a moment, they felt much more relaxed. However, when he thought about how many Blood Clan juniors had died at the hands of this brat, his heart felt heavy. Somewhere in the Alpha Origin domain, 3 figures were still lying dormant. Ding Yu frowned. How long has it been? Jade Demon Burn immediately replied. 3 days. That's right. It's been 3 days. Why are those Blood Clan members nowhere to be seen? Previously, that group of blood breeds would wander back and forth along this line of defense that spanned 100,000 kilometers. However, ever since the blood breeds that they had joined forces against joined in, they could no longer see them. This matter was a little strange. They should have left. Zhao Yunlu, who had been silent all this while, spoke. 1 inch gone? Ding Yu was stunned. After all, Zhao Yunlu was from a top domain and the information that his elders had given him before he left was more comprehensive. Therefore, he had a rough idea of the current situation. He explained, the Blood Clan's actions will easily cause public anger. Therefore, they will not go too far in every battle of the Divine Sea. When they feel that they have obtained enough to maintain their ranking in the top 100, they will stop. This is also a tacit understanding between the Blood Clan and the other major races. Therefore, although the Blood Clan occupies a lot of spots in every battle of the Divine Sea, their ranking is relatively low, around 70 or 80 places. If not, it will easily cause the other domains to join forces against them. After hearing his explanation, the other 2 suddenly understood. The blood race had an unfair advantage in the first place. If they insisted on killing all the monsters from the other realms, they would only succeed once at most. If there was a next time, all the realms would have to work together to get rid of the blood race first. This was not impossible. They only needed the monsters from the top domains to take the lead. When the time comes, if the Divine Sea realm cultivators who entered did nothing but search for the Blood Clan, how could the Blood Clan bear it? They could only stop while they were ahead. Only by obtaining appropriate gains and stopping in a timely manner would they be able to survive. The Blood Clan had maintained this way of doing things for thousands of years and were already familiar with it. They have all left. What are we waiting for? Let's go. Ding Yu walked out of her hiding place as she spoke. The 3 of them quickly rushed forward. Zhao Yunlu was not the only one who saw this. After lying dormant for a few days and not seeing any traces of the Blood Clan, the monsters from the other large domains all rushed forward. Now, the Battle of the Divine Sea was almost half over. Some people had obtained a lot of gains while others did not. However, to all the cultivators who participated in this grand event, the most important thing was to survive. Only by surviving could they have a chance of winning. A large number of cultivators rushed in from different directions. Along the way, there were bound to be unexpected encounters. Under such circumstances, the 2 sides would definitely have to fight. There was no possibility of peaceful coexistence. Moreover, because the area of the Alpha Origin realm had been greatly reduced, Many cultivators moved in groups of 2 or 3. They were no longer alone like before. The situation outside was that the names on the left and right door pillars were constantly flickering. Some people's rankings rose, some fell, and even more names disappeared. However, no matter how the others' names changed, Luye, who was at the top of the list, remained as steady as a mountain, unmoving. Yen Yin had a feeling that he would be at the top of the list. This made many experts from the other domains not know whether to laugh or cry. They secretly cursed that there were no heroes in this world. This situation lasted for a few days before Luye's name was suddenly overtaken. Looking at the name that surpassed him, Luye Yellow Dragon Domain, Ancient Jade Tower. This was a natural situation. The kid from the Nine Heavens realm had used some unknown method to kill more than a dozen vampires to obtain a temporary ranking. He would definitely be weak in the future, so it was reasonable for him to be overtaken. Although the Yellow Dragon Domain boasted that it was the center of the starry sky and was known as the #1 domain in the starry sky, its strength was obvious to all. The top geniuses from the Yellow Dragon Domain were naturally extraordinary. In the past battles of the Divine Sea, as long as the cultivators from the Yellow Dragon Domain did not die, they would generally be able to obtain a top 3 ranking. This was the powerful foundation of a top domain. There were more than a dozen domains that were comparable to the Yellow Dragon Domain. Therefore, it was foreseeable that as time passed, more and more people would surpass Luye and push his ranking down again and again. When Luye killed the vampires, the experts from the other domains were overjoyed. They all felt that this kid was amazing and had helped them vent 1,000 years of resentment. However, his name had always been at the top of the list, which was really a little eye-catching and made people feel that he did not live up to his name. Now that he was pulled down from the top spot, they suddenly felt that he was much more pleasing to the eye. Well, if this kid's ranking could fall out of the top 10, it would be even more pleasing to the eye. Luye was collecting herbs. He had discovered a pattern. If the Alpha Origin realm was compared to the Spirit Stream battlefield, it could be divided into the outer circle, the inner circle, and the core circle. The outer circle was where he had appeared. That place was rich in spirit jade, which could be seen from how he had casually found a spirit jade vein. When his clone wandered around the outer circle, he would often collect some scattered spirit jade. His current location was considered the inner circle. Unlike the outer circle, this place was rich in rare flowers and herbs. Yang Qing had previously warned him that this place's environment was different from the outside world because it was an extremely ancient wilderness. Many of the rare flowers and herbs that grew here were already extinct in the outside world. If he had the chance, he could collect some. Even if he did not know how to refine them, he could use them to exchange for spirit jade when he traveled the starry sky in the future. Because of their rarity, the spirit flowers and herbs that grew here were especially precious. They were good things that could not be found anywhere else. It would have been fine if he did not encounter them, but now that he did, Luye naturally would not let them go. This was also the reason why his ranking had dropped. During this period, he had encountered 2 battles. One was a vampire that had been attracted by his blood cry technique, which he easily defeated. The other was a close combat with a human armament cultivator, which Luye was very satisfied with. If the other party had not suddenly ambushed him, he would have been quite willing to let the other party live. However, since the other party had ambushed him first, he could only show no mercy. It was unknown which domain that cultivator had come from, but he had clearly felt some regret before his death. He was not proficient in the way of medicine, but he had been influenced by second senior sister and Hua Ci. He knew that many spirit herbs needed to be collected using special methods and special containers. Otherwise, it would be easy to cause the medicinal properties to dissipate. However, this was all he knew. Let alone him, even his second senior sister might not be able to recognize all the spirit herbs that grew here. Therefore, Luye used the most direct method to collect these spiritual herbs. He dug them out along with the roots and threw them directly into his storage space. He didn't use any special collection methods or special containers to store them. He just put them aside. This method might cause some medicinal properties to dissipate, but it was efficient and did not waste time. Lu Yi's main body and doppelganger moved in two different directions, and for a while, they had a bountiful harvest. Until a certain moment, the doppelganger suddenly stopped and lowered his head to look at his waist. The doppelganger's waist hung a sword gourd. It could be said that the doppelganger had become a sword cultivator mainly because of the existence of the sword gourd. This mysterious object could devour treasures and turn them into sword chi. Moreover, the higher the quality of the treasures it devoured, the more powerful the sword chi it turned into. Lu Yi had killed and set fires in the 9 provinces and obtained many spirit tools and magic tools. Those things could not be sold for much in the Tianji treasury, so he had let the sword gourd devour them all. However, the quality of the treasures it devoured was not high. Hence, the sword chi was not powerful enough. This was also one of the reasons why the doppelganger's overall strength was not as good as the main body's. He had woken up at 6:30 in the morning and had only managed to write 1 chapter. His head was numb and his thoughts were very chaotic. Chapter 1252. If the sword gourd could devour some high-quality spirit treasures, the strength of the clone would inevitably improve, and it might even surpass the main body. But if so, the price to pay would be great. The clone had always existed as a cover and was not a fundamental thing, so there were some things that did not need to be forced. Killing the enemy mainly relied on the many means of the main body. But at this moment, the sword gourd at the waist of the clone had some strange reaction. It was trembling slightly, and even transmitted a hint of joy to the clone. Lu Yi didn't know what was going on. What Mu Rong doubted was that the sword gourd's quality was very high, absolutely surpassing all the treasures Lu Yi had seen so far. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for it to easily devour spirit tools and magical tools. Moreover, there were many complex restrictions inside, and Lu Yi had only refined a part of them, so he couldn't display the full power of the sword gourd. But he didn't know what kind of wall it was. Perhaps he could go back and ask Yang Qing. Such a treasure naturally looked quite spiritual. It wouldn't be obvious at ordinary times, but at this time it was very strange. It was unavoidable that it would be strange. The clone silently sensed and soon raised his head to look in a certain direction. He noticed that the sword gourd seemed to be reacting to something in that direction. This was the alpha origin stage. What could the sword gourd he obtained from the sword tool sect's secret domain be reacting to? A bold guess faintly formed in his heart, but he couldn't confirm it. He could only set off to investigate. After making up his mind, the clone rose into the air and rushed in that direction, while the main body stayed thousands of miles behind the clone, ensuring that he could reach the clone at any time. After flying for half a day, the clone suddenly stopped and looked up. He saw that in the sky over there, treasure light was overflowing, flowing with brilliant colors. The many colors in the sky were inexplicably changing, as if a great treasure was about to be born. In the perception of his divine sense, he also sensed that there were several powerful auras nearby rushing in that direction. It was a very normal thing. The movement over there was so obvious that as long as the cultivators nearby could see it, they would be attracted to investigate. It was certain that the phenomenon over there had some mysterious connection with the sword gourd. Normally, his avatar would bring the sword gourd everywhere, so it was not too much of a problem. There were many gourd-type treasures. Take the 9 continents for example. 4th senior brother Li Baxian had a gourd-like treasure on his waist. 4th senior brother Li Baxian stored many of his flying swords in it. He would also use it to store wine. Therefore, even if there were cultivators in the alpha origin stage who saw the sword gourd on his clone's waist, they wouldn't think too much about it. However, if the phenomenon over there had some mysterious connection with the sword gourd, it wouldn't be appropriate for his clone to bring the sword gourd over. Under the watchful eyes of so many people, what could possibly be exposed? With this thought in mind, the doppelganger raised his hand and constructed a void spirit rune. In the next moment, a figure appeared in front of him. The real body rushed over and continued to fly forward. Since it wasn't suitable for his clone to show up, he would send his main body to battle. As for his clone, it would be enough to find a place to hide. He would let his main body scout out the situation first. Two indeed, many people were attracted by the strange phenomenon here. When Lu Yi arrived, he looked up and saw that only a few people were left. Near the two spirit peaks, there were figures standing in all directions. Some were in groups of 2 or 3, while others were alone. Their appearances were different, but their auras were powerful. There seemed to be more than 200 people. There were a total of 2,000 to 3,000 cultivators participating in the battle for the Divine Sea. More than half of the time had passed, and almost 1,000 people had died. There were only 1,000 or 2,000 people left. Now, there were more than 200 gathered here. Lu Yi didn't know where they had come from. When his main body and his clones searched around, they didn't find much. But it wasn't strange when he thought about it. The phenomenon here was obvious and powerful. As long as there were cultivators nearby who saw it, they would definitely come over to inquire about the situation. And this was only the number of people on the surface. There were definitely people hiding in the dark. The source of the strange phenomenon was an old vine that hung between the two spiritual mountains. It was vast and ancient, and it emitted an extremely clear and wild aura. There were only a few green leaves on it, and on the old vine, there were 3 gourds. 1 big and 2 small. The 2 small gourds were only the size of a fist and were green all over. At a glance, it was obvious that they hadn't matured yet. However, the big one was different. It was about the size of a human head and was covered in a dense glow. It looked like a melon that was about to fall when it was ripe. The phenomenon in the sky was caused by this big gourd. When Lu Yi saw this gourd, he knew that his previous guess was right. He was glad that he was careful enough and didn't let his clone come over to investigate. Otherwise, when they resonated with each other, something might really be exposed. The sword gourd he obtained from the sword instrument sect's secret realm was undoubtedly from here. Otherwise, the sword gourd wouldn't have such an abnormal change. The sword instrument sect was a powerful sect in the previous 9 provinces era. Back then, an expert from the sword instrument sect had participated in the battle for the Divine Sea in the Alpha Origin stage and obtained a sword gourd here. 10,000 years later, by chance, Lu Yi brought the sword gourd back to the Alpha Origin stage, which led to all the previous phenomena. If the sword gourd was a treasure, then the 3 gourds here were undoubtedly treasures as well. It was just that the 2 small gourds hadn't matured yet and probably couldn't be used. However, the big gourd was about to mature. Many cultivators were attracted by the phenomenon and could also see this. Therefore, everyone's eyes were burning with desire as they stared at the big gourd. However, because the time wasn't right, and because there were too many people gathered, everyone was restraining themselves. Otherwise, with so many people gathered together, they would have already started fighting. How could there be any peace? The sword gourd could devour treasures and turn them into sword chi to kill enemies. So what was the use of this big gourd? Could it also devour treasures and turn them into sword chi? If that was the case, it wouldn't be of much use to him. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Lu Yi. He immediately became the focus of everyone's attention. There was no other reason. His cultivation was 1 minor realm lower than others, so it was naturally easy for him to attract attention. Many gazes were filled with surprise, astonishment, ridicule, and even more were eager to cause trouble. When the door opened, Lu Yi had left late, so those who had entered the Alpha Origin stage before him didn't know that an 8th Order cultivator was participating in the Divine Sea battle. Now that they saw him, they couldn't help but be a little surprised. But in this place, no one would let you go just because your cultivation was low. What was certain was that many people had their eyes on him at this moment, but because of the precious treasures in front of them, it wasn't good to start a fight, so everyone was restraining themselves. Lu Yi was calm and fearless, as if he didn't care at all. If he wanted to, he could naturally disguise his cultivation as a 9th Order realm cultivator, but it was rare for him to meet so many cultivators together, so he had the intention of making a fuss about his cultivation, so he naturally wouldn't disguise himself. It could only be said that whoever targeted him was unlucky. After these battles, Lu Yi had a general understanding of the overall strength of the geniuses from each great realm. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded in his ear, "Junior brother Lu, over here." Lu Yi looked in the direction of the voice and saw a familiar charming face at a glance. It was 9 profound worlds, Yu Yaorao. What a coincidence, Lu Yi hadn't expected her to be here too. There were 2 other men with her, both of whom had participated in the siege of Lu Yi before, but none of them knew who they were besieging at that time. One of the 2 men was an ordinary-looking man who didn't have any special features just from his clothes, but his aura was restrained and pure. He was the body cultivator, while the other man had a straight figure, an arrogant expression, and an aura as sharp as a sword. It was the sword cultivator. Among the 3 who had besieged him at that time, this sword cultivator was the most ruthless, but Lu Yi didn't blame him. Sword cultivators were all like this, and if they weren't ruthless, they wouldn't be sword cultivators. Of course, Lu Yi wouldn't hold a grudge. The 3 of them had besieged a lone blood race cultivator, so what did it have to do with him? 6 Yu Yaorao took the initiative to greet him, so Lu Yi took the opportunity to rush in her direction. It just so happened that he had many things he wanted to ask. Previously, in the fairy tree realm, Lu Yi had a rough understanding of Yu Yaorao's temperament and knew that she was a good woman. Not to mention anything else, her knowledge of the starry sky was much better than his, so perhaps she knew some things about this place? Senior Sister Yu. Lu Yi stepped forward and bowed. Yu Yaorao smiled and nodded. We meet again. Previously, the 2 of them had parted ways after dealing with the insectoid nest in the fairy tree realm, each of them making their own choices. At that time, Yu Yaorao only felt that it was too dangerous to enter the insectoid tree realm, so she didn't follow them. Now that Lu Yi was standing here, it undoubtedly explained some things. Yu Yaorao was a clever person, so there were some things that were best understood in her heart and didn't need to be said out loud. She immediately introduced her 2 companions to Lu Yi. This is fellow Taoist Ding Yuding from Profound Crossing World, and this is fellow Taoist Zhao Yunlu from the Top Domain Conqueror Star. She then introduced Lu Yi to the 2. Lu Yi bowed politely. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Ding Yuding nodded slightly and returned the greeting. Zhao Yunlu, on the other hand, didn't look sideways and only stared at the big gourd flickering with light hanging on the old vine, as if he didn't hear anything. Yu Yaorao was somewhat embarrassed. She naturally knew what Zhao Yunlu was thinking, just like how Zhao Yunlu knew what she was thinking. Although they weren't familiar with each other before, but after getting along with each other for this period of time, they could roughly grasp each other's temperament. Zhao Yunliu's attitude was undoubtedly his response. Fortunately, Lu Yi didn't seem to care about this. It was unknown whether he was open-minded or his cultivation wasn't enough, but his imposing manner was lacking as he asked, Senior Sister Yu, what is the name of this gourd? How did it cause such a big commotion? Yu Yaorao quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Those who could come here, no matter what their cultivation was, were all top geniuses of their respective domains and were proud and arrogant people. She knew Zhao Yunliu's character. From her previous interactions with Lu Yi, she was undoubtedly a very opinionated and persistent person who dared to fight. Yu Yaorao warmly invited Lu Yi over. If the 2 of them became sisters, then she would be caught in the middle. Fortunately, this situation didn't happen, so she immediately explained to Lu Yi. Chapter 1253. There are treasures in the starry sky. They are mysterious and unfathomable. The reincarnation tree is a treasure in the starry sky. I think Junior Marshal Brother Lu should know about it. Lu Yi nodded. Yang Qing had told him about it before. Yu Yaorao continued, there is only one treasure. It means that there will not be 2 treasures that are the same in the world. It does not mean that there is only one treasure at the level of a treasure. The reincarnation tree is a treasure. The old vine in front of you is also a treasure. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. It is also a treasure? Then does it have its own intelligence? Yu Yaorao laughed in spite of herself. Not all treasures have intelligence. Of course, most of them do, but there are always some exceptions. This old vine is one of them. It doesn't have its own intelligence. It is called the good fortune vine. It doesn't even have anything mysterious about it, but the treasured gourds it gave birth to are all mysterious and possess some peculiar power. Lu Yi was interested. What kind of powers do they have? Lu Yi was interested. What kind of powers do they have? Yu Yaorao said, "The gourds produced by the vine of fortune have different powers. I can't explain it in a few words. However, I heard that a cultivator from a top realm once obtained a wind gourd here. The wind gourd could blow out dark flames and strong winds. Cultivators who touched it would die. Now, it is the treasure of that realm. That realm was originally a large realm. Because of the wind gourd, no one dared to touch it and it gradually became a top realm." Ding Yu added, "It seems that there is also a sword gourd. More than 10,000 years ago, a cultivator once met the owner of the sword gourd in the starry sky. The sword gourd could spit out endless sword energy. It could destroy the stars and the sun." Lu Yi suddenly felt a little guilty. He touched his nose and did not say anything. The sword gourd was hanging on the waist of his clone. Fortunately, others did not know about it. If they knew, it would cause a lot of madness. There were many gourd-type treasures that could spit out sword energy. Therefore, it was difficult for people to associate the sword gourd of his clone with the legendary treasure. After all, no matter who looked at it, how could such a treasure be on a divine sea realm cultivator? However, although the sword gourd was mysterious, it was a bit exaggerated to say that it could destroy the stars and the sun. This might have something to do with Lu Ye's cultivation and the low quality of the treasures the sword gourd devoured. Due to the limitations of his cultivation, Lu Yi was unable to completely refine the many profound restrictions within the sword gourd. Naturally, he was unable to display the full power of the sword gourd. Moreover, the quality of the treasures he devoured was not high enough, which directly affected the power of his sword qi. If the sword gourd Ding Yu spoke of was really his clone's sword gourd, then this treasure from the sword artifact sect would be extraordinary. There should be a few other gourds with different effects that have been obtained by others, but they have been lost for far too long, or hidden away by their owners. We have never heard of them, nor have we been able to find them. However, it is an indisputable fact that these gourds all came from the vines of fortune. I never thought that we would encounter such an opportunity in this battle for the divine sea. Lu Yi understood what she was implying. Isn't this an opportunity every time the divine sea competes? Yu Yaorao couldn't help but laugh. How could it be every time? Maybe it will only appear once in thousands of years. Moreover, a treasure like the vines of fortune usually doesn't appear in front of people. It will only appear when the gourds are about to mature. Junior Marshall brother, take a look. Don't you see any slight abnormalities in the space where the vines of fortune are? If she didn't mention this, Lu Yi wouldn't have noticed it. After her reminder, Lu Yi carefully examined the space and found that the space where the vines of fortune were located was somewhat hazy. It was like a flower in the mist of the moon in the water. Although we can see the vines of fortune now, they are actually not in this space. Its main body is located in a mysterious place. What we see is just a projection of it. This point had already been confirmed by someone, but Lu Yi didn't see it because he came too late. Since so many cultivators had come, some of them naturally rushed over to get close to the vines of fortune. Regardless of whether the gourd had matured or not, they would pick it first. Even if doing so would weaken the power of the gourd, it was still better than letting others snatch it away. However, when they really touched it, they found that the space was not right. They couldn't touch the vines of fortune and the gourd on them at all. This was also the biggest reason why more than 200 cultivators could restrain themselves in front of such a precious treasure. Before the gourd was completely mature, it wouldn't jump out from another space. Only when it was completely mature would it really fall into this space. At that time, it would be the time for many cultivators to fight over it. It could be foreseen that it would definitely be a large-scale chaotic battle. The vines of fortune are precious treasures in the starry sky. So what is the quality of the gourd? Lu Yi asked. This was also what he was puzzled about. He couldn't judge the quality of the sword gourd because he didn't know how many restrictions it contained. Hearing this, Ding Yu couldn't help but laugh and say, "The gourd is a precious treasure, so we can't judge its quality. If a cultivator in the spirit stream realm holds it, it would be a spiritual tool. If a cultivator in the Cloud River realm holds it, it would be a magic tool. If a cultivator in the Divine Ocean realm holds it, it would be a spiritual treasure. It depends on how much power the cultivator can unleash. This is also one of the characteristics of precious treasures. Many precious treasures have their own characteristics. Otherwise, a treasure of this quality wouldn't be easily activated by anyone. Depending on one's cultivation level, one should use a treasure of a certain level. This was common knowledge in the cultivation world. If a treasure of a Sunshine Realm cultivator was given to Lu Yi and the others, even if they were all monsters in their respective realms, they wouldn't be able to activate it. However, precious treasures were different. Due to their unique characteristics, their quality was completely dependent on the power the cultivator could unleash. In other words, treasures like the gourd were treasures that could continuously expand along with the cultivator's cultivation level. This was the dream of all cultivators. Lu Yi was now certain that the sword gourd in his clone was definitely from the vines of fortune. It was the sword gourd that Ding Yu had mentioned before. The sword gourd had always been different from the other treasures Lu Yi had come into contact with. He hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now it seemed that this was an extremely precious characteristic. What kind of power does this gourd possess? Lu Yi asked. Yu Yaorao shook her head. No one knows before it ripens. However, one thing is certain. The gourds born from the vines of fortune all have different powers. Since there are gourds like the wind gourd and sword gourd, this gourd that is about to ripen will not overlap with the one that appeared before. Lu Yi still wanted to ask a few more questions, but Zhao Yunlu, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Why are you asking so many questions? If you really want to know, ask your elders after you leave the Alpha Origin stage." Even though he was berating Lu Yi, he did not even glance at him. Yu Yaorao's brows slightly creased. No matter what, she was the one who had called Lu Yi over. Although it was indeed wrong for her to call Lu Yi without the consent of her companions in this kind of situation, Zhao Yunliu's attitude had undoubtedly made it somewhat difficult for her to deal with. She did not know if junior brother Lu would be angry. If the two of them quarreled and fought, she would be in a difficult position. Fortunately, Lu Yi did not seem to have any intention of bickering with Zhao Yunlu. He merely nodded and said, "Fellow cultivator is right, I have been rude." He looked towards Yu Yaorao and cupped his fists together. "Thank you, senior sister, for clearing my doubts. If senior sister needs any help, please let me know." While speaking, his figure flashed to the side. Zhao Yunliu's rejection was already written all over his face, and Lu Yi naturally would not continue to stay here. If Yu Yaorao had not called him over, and he happened to want to inquire about some things, he would not have run over on such an occasion. He knew his own situation. His inferior cultivation had already attracted the attention of many people. Yu Yaorao had kindly called him over, but he could not make things difficult for her. Now that he knew what he needed to know, there was no need for him to be an eyesore. Moments after Lu Yi left, Yu Yaorao sighed and said, "Senior brother Zhao is very powerful." Yu Yaorao had seen Lu Ye's strength when they had joined hands in Fairy Tree World, and he was indeed not inferior to her. Moreover, he had killed his way into Insect Race's Tree World all by himself, and he was still able to come out safely. Yu Yaorao knew that she couldn't do that. Of course, this was also related to the fact that she was a magic cultivator. No matter what Lu Ye's true strength was, just from what she had observed, he was qualified to join forces with them. Now that the gourd was about to mature, having one more person would increase their strength. On top of that, Lu Yi was someone they had cooperated with before, so naturally, they could rope him in. This was the reason why Yu Yaorao had called Lu Yi over, but she had not expected her companions to reject him so much. Zhao Yunlu said casually, "Of course I know he's powerful. Who doesn't have some ability to survive until now? Moreover, he's alone. His strength might not be weak, but his cultivation is a shortcoming. With his 8th order cultivation, he has already attracted many people's attention. If he really acts together with us, if someone tries to target him, we will have to take care of him. Or snatch the gourd. Taking a step back, after this matter is over, we will join forces to kill the enemy. One more person means one less share. Fellow Taoist you have to understand one thing, I am not targeting him as a person. Not to mention him, even if Guyu Lu and the others wanted to join forces with us at this moment, I would not agree. In the current situation, a 3-person team is the best configuration, and from what I can see, he should be a weapon cultivator. If he really joins us, he won't be able to play much of a role. Even if we want to recruit people, we should recruit a ghost cultivator. Yu Yaorao pondered silently for a moment before nodding. Senior brother's consideration is thorough, little sister's consideration is lacking. Zhao Yunlu waved his hand. Since we are joining forces, before making any decision, you should discuss it carefully with your companions. Don't act arbitrarily. Yu Yaorao looked sincere. There won't be a next time. Zhao Yunlu nodded with satisfaction. Although no one had ever said who was the leader of this 3-person team, since they had joined forces, Zhao Yunlu had always been the leader. He and Yu Yaorao spoke in a dignified manner, but no one knew how much selfishness there was in it. Chapter 1254. There were more than 200 figures gathered on the left and right sides of the 2 peaks. People were constantly attracted by the phenomenon here. When they arrived, they quickly figured out the situation here and stood quietly to the side. The scene seemed peaceful, but in fact, there was an undercurrent surging. No one knew what the others were thinking, but they all maintained a tacit understanding. Before the treasure gourd matured and fell to the ground, no one would easily start a fight. In such an occasion, once someone started a fight, it was very likely that the third party would benefit from it. Those who came were not fools, so naturally, they would not do such a stupid thing. Most of them came in groups, but none of the groups had more than 3 people. This was a very normal thing, just like Zhao Yunlu's words just now. As Yu Yaomei said, if there were many good people, it would be difficult to split the loot. So, a 3-person team was the best configuration. It could ensure the combat effectiveness of the team and also ensure that there would be an appropriate harvest. Even if there were people who came here alone, they began to look for opportunities to form groups. It didn't matter if they hadn't seen each other before or didn't know each other. Since they had the heart to form a group, they could temporarily join forces. It didn't even matter if they weren't from the same race. Of course, such a group was very loose. There was no guarantee. When they joined forces to fight the enemy, it was hard to say whether they could really work together. Many cultivators who were alone found temporary companions here. Only Lu Yi was alone. No one cared about him. His 8th order divine sea cultivation was too eye-catching. Anyone with a bit of brain would not come to find him. Those who really came to find him at this time must have bad intentions. He was happy to see this. However, Yu Yaorao couldn't stand it anymore and quietly sent him a message, advising him to leave as soon as possible. Lu Yi just thanked her and went his own way. Seeing him like this, Yu Yaorao couldn't say anything more. She didn't deny Lu Ye's strength, but being targeted in such an occasion might not have a good end. Although they had interacted with each other before, in fact, they didn't have much of a friendship. As time passed, the people who came gradually became fewer and fewer. In the sky, the phenomenon became more and more magnificent. Everyone knew that the treasure gourd on the good fortune vine would mature soon, but when? No one could be sure. This kind of thing can only be experienced once in thousands of years, and there is no precedent to refer to, so we can only wait. Lu Ye's expression was calm. There was no sense of crisis at all. He was only thinking about one thing. There were so many people. How could he snatch the gourd? Although he was confident in his own strength, when the gourd matured, the situation would definitely become chaotic. At that time, everyone would be surrounded by countless enemies. No matter how strong someone was, they wouldn't be able to guarantee that they would succeed. This kind of thing, part of it depends on strength, but most of it depends on luck. As for how to escape after snatching it, Lu Yi wasn't worried about that. His doppelganger was hidden thousands of miles away, and he could teleport there with a thought. Therefore, the key question is how to do it. All of them said that he already had a nation's worth of Jianan. But for treasures of this level, 1 wouldn't be too little, and 2 wouldn't be too much. Naturally, he had to snatch it when he saw it. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't come up with any good ideas. Unless he could set up a formation in advance. Only by borrowing the power of the formation would there be a chance. How could he have the chance to set up a formation under the watchful eyes of everyone? If he made a move, he would immediately become the target of public criticism. At that time, no matter how strong his foundation was, he would be turned into ashes. He would instantly turn into ashes. In the end, he decided to go all out to fight for it. It would be good if he could snatch it, but it didn't matter if he couldn't. After all, it was a treasure. Those who were fated would get it. Thinking of this, his mood relaxed. Even if he didn't get anything in the end, he would just treat it as an eye-opener. Hundreds of people were waiting here for the treasure to appear. The experts on the White Jade platform were very puzzled because, according to the previous pattern, this was the time when the number of people would rapidly decrease. At that time, the rankings would change very quickly. Such changes would continue until the end of the grand event. However, the current situation was completely different. Some people's names were disappearing. The top 100 rankings were also changing, but it wasn't as intense as expected. It was as if the entire Alpha Origin realm had suddenly fallen into a relatively calm period. This made everyone unable to understand what was going on. They couldn't know the specific situation inside while watching and waiting from the outside. They could only continue to wait. The only thing that made many experts dissatisfied was that Lu Yi from the Nine Heavens realm was still alive. Not only was he alive, he still occupied the third place. The two people in front of him, one was Gu Yulo from the Yellow Dragon realm, and the other was Bai Ping from the Northern Underworld Ghost Frog. Both had powerful realms. Since these two overtook him, no one below him has overtaken him. This made many powerful cultivators furious. They felt that the Divine Sea realm cultivators of this generation were really unlucky. In the Alpha Origin realm, the strange phenomenon between the two peaks suddenly disappeared. The expressions of the many Divine Sea experts who had been waiting here for a few days all fluttered. They realized that the treasure was probably about to appear. Immediately, they secretly urged their spiritual power. They were waiting for the treasure to mature and fall to snatch it. Between the two peaks, the void where the vine of fortune was also trembled slightly. It was as if the ancient vine was about to break out from another space. Under such a tension, the huge gourd shook slightly. Suddenly, it fell from the vine. When ripples spread out, it fell into this space. Without the slightest pause, it directly turned into a stream of light and flew in a direction. Coincidentally, it crashed into the arms of a cultivator. The cultivator didn't have time to react. He only felt his arms sink. He instinctively reached out and the gourd was already in his hands. However, he didn't have the slightest hint of joy. His expression suddenly changed as he raised his hand and threw the gourd out. However, he was still a step too late. Almost at the same time as he threw the gourd, colorful streams of light bombarded his direction from all directions. Under the cover of the light, the cultivator's figure was instantly drowned by the chaotic spiritual power fluctuations. He only had time to curse before he turned into a rain of blood. No matter how strong a person was, they couldn't withstand the siege of everyone in such a situation. Not only was he beaten to death, even the few cultivators near him had suffered an unexpected calamity. All of them were covered in dirt and grime as they cursed inwardly. Their figures swayed as they flew towards the direction of the treasured gourd. Wave after wave of attacks were launched in all directions. The scene was instantly thrown into chaos. Nearly 2 months after the start of the battle for the Spirit Sea of the Alpha Origin stage, the curtains of the largest chaotic battle had thus opened. At such a time and in such a situation, everyone around was an enemy. Even if they were companions who had just agreed to form an alliance, it was not worth trusting. Hundreds of people fought in a chaotic battle. Immediately, several auras were annihilated. This was followed by the death of even more people. Everyone knew that this was not the time to fight for the gourd, because once the gourd was in their hands, they would inevitably become the target of others' attacks. Therefore, almost everyone's goal was to eliminate the opponents around them. At the same time, they followed the direction the gourd fled in and made sure it didn't leave their sight. This situation was bound to continue for a period of time. It could be several hours or days. When the number of competitors decreased to a certain extent, The cultivators who were still alive would truly make their move to snatch the gourd. In the blink of an eye, the space between the two peaks was empty. Only 3 figures were left standing. Lu Yi was in the middle, holding the Panshan saber in his hand. On the pitch-black blade, a touch of dark red slowly gathered at the tip of the saber. It turned into a drop of blood and dripped down. At his feet, a headless corpse fell into the valley. The head rolled a few times, and the eyes were wide with astonishment. It seemed that it did not expect that it would be cut to death so easily. On the left and right, there were 2 figures. Both of them had an expression of disbelief. The one on the left was a delicate female cultivator. She was undoubtedly a human. The one on the right, however, was of an unknown race. Although it was roughly the same as the human race, its face was covered with something like snake scales. It looked extremely strange. Lu Yi recognized her. This guy. At that time, on the white jade platform, Yang Qing had haggled in front of his elder's stall and bought a treasure for a piece of spirit jade. Even that piece of spirit jade was only a verbal how. According to Yang Qing, this guy's elder had offended him before, so he wanted to teach them a lesson. Lu Yi still remembered when he walked away with Yang Qing. This guy was angry. An angry gaze. Those elders did not dare to act rashly in front of Yang Qing, but they must have instructed their juniors to deal with Lu Yi in the alpha origin stage. They had not been able to find Lu Ye's trace before, but they did not expect to meet him here. Naturally, there was no need to be polite. He had also formed an alliance with others. There were a total of 3 people in the team. Besides him and the delicate female cultivator, there was also the dead ghost cultivator. While the others were staring at the treasure gourd that was about to mature, the 3 of them were staring at Lu Yi. They were waiting for the chaos to arise so that they could take Lu Ye's head. At that time, they would still have time to chase after the treasure gourd. There were definitely others who had the same idea as them, but since the 3 of them had already secretly arranged things, it was not good for others to interfere, lest a conflict arises. Moreover, it was indeed more appropriate to chase after the treasure gourd at this time. Compared to a harvest, the treasure gourd was undoubtedly much more valuable. As long as they could succeed, even if they had to withdraw from the alpha origin stage on the spot, this trip would not be a loss. The 3 of them originally thought that it would be an easy task. Who would have thought that when they really made a move, they realized that things had exceeded their expectations. The ghost cultivator had long been hiding beside Lu Yi. Logically speaking, Lu Yi should not have the strength to fight back under a sudden attack. But in the end, the ghost cultivator was the one who died. At this moment, the 2 of them immediately understood that Lu Yi had long known that the ghost cultivator was hiding nearby. He had been hiding and waiting for this moment to strike. Chapter 12:55. The ghost cultivator died too quickly, so quickly that his 2 companions didn't even have time to lend a helping hand. However, this didn't mean that the ghost cultivator's strength was really so weak. Which cultivator who could participate in this grand event was weak? It was just that Lu Ye's timing was too exquisite, and his counterattack was almost at the moment when the ghost cultivator attacked with all his strength. In order to achieve the effect of a one-hit kill, all the ghost cultivators would erupt with all their strength at the moment of attack. This was also the time when the ghost cultivator's defense was at its weakest. The opportunity flashed by, but Lu Yi was able to grasp it perfectly. How could a ghost cultivator with almost no defense survive under the crackling of the Panshan saber? This kind of reaction wasn't something that everyone could have. One had to go through a series of life and death battles to accumulate the experience of facing an enemy. He looked at the female cultivator in silence, as if he was looking at a dead person. The female cultivator's hair stood on end, and waves of tingling pain came from all over her body. This was an instinctive reaction when the sense of crisis was strong to the extreme. She was also a person who had been on the battlefield for a long time, so how could she not know what this meant? Without waiting for Lu Yi to attack again, she decisively retreated and shouted, "Zhu Ho, this old lady won't get involved in your stupid business." These words seemed to be said to her companions, but in fact, they were said to Lu Yi to make her position clear. Even so, she still didn't dare to let down her guard, afraid that Lu Yi would chase after her with a saber. What made her feel lucky was that the weapon cultivator opposite her just stared at her and didn't have the slightest intention of chasing after her. Only when she retreated to a relatively safe distance did the female cultivator hurriedly turn around and quickly leave. The few of them were extremely loose allies. When there were benefits, everyone could work together for a short period of time, but once there was trouble, they would fall apart. The female cultivator could retreat, but Zhu Hou couldn't. He remembered Lu Yi, and how could Lu Yi not remember him? Since he chose to fight here, there was no possibility of a good ending. Before leaving, her elders had already warned her that if there was a chance, she must deal with this weapon cultivator and help them vent their anger. Therefore, almost at the instant the female cultivator retreated, Zhu Hou brazenly pounced at Lu Yi. Even though Lu Yi had already displayed his powerful strength by killing the ghost cultivator with a single slash, he wasn't afraid at all, because dealing with weapon cultivators was what he was best at. As he pounced, 3 pitch-black balls suddenly appeared around him and spun rapidly around his body. In the blink of an eye, they were right in front of Lu Yi, but before they could even make a move, the 3 pitch-black balls were already spinning towards him. Although Lu Yi didn't know what the balls were, he didn't know how to deal with them. His Pan-Shan saber slashed through the gaps between the 3 balls. This blade could have landed on Zhu Hou's body, but the black balls that had been rotating in a rather orderly manner suddenly became chaotic. One of the black balls strangely paused, just in time to block the mountain pan blade slash. It was too late for Lu Yi to stop his attack. The long saber hit the black ball, but it didn't break. He didn't even feel much force. The black ball suddenly collapsed and turned into a ball of black light that clung onto the Pan-Shan saber. In an instant, the Pan-Shan saber became incomparably heavy. That wasn't all. The other 2 balls of black light also clung onto the Pan-Shan saber, making it even heavier. This was the first time Lu Yi felt like he couldn't lift his saber. The terrifying weight even caused his body to sink slightly. He finally knew what the 3 balls of black light were. They could actually cling onto a weapon cultivator's weapon and increase its weight like a mountain. A weapon cultivator without a weapon was like a tiger without its teeth. How much of his strength could he unleash? This was Zhu Hou's unique method to deal with weapon cultivators. Relying on this unique secret technique, 2 weapon cultivators had already died at his hands. He believed that the one in front of him wouldn't be an exception. Therefore, he laughed and smashed his fist down. Die! This punch was like a thunderbolt. It was extremely powerful. As the fist energy surged out, even the void began to distort. He thought that he would at least be able to smash this weapon cultivator's nose and face until it was swollen. Unexpectedly, the other party's reaction was extremely fast. The moment the 2 fists collided, the smile on Zhu Ji's face froze. This was because he felt a copious amount of power from the other party's fist that was difficult to resist. This power was so great that even he felt that he was somewhat inferior to it. This was a weapon cultivator? Zhu Gu suddenly wondered if he had made an error in judgment. Just as he was lost in thought, Lu Yi had already kicked out. This instinctive reaction was extremely fast. Zhu Hou didn't have any time to react. He was kicked in the stomach without any room to react. His entire body flew out like a ragged sack. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Yi lowered his head to look at his Pan-Shan saber. He tried to lift it up and wave it, but it was incomparably difficult. At this moment, the Pan-Shan saber had become extremely heavy. He tried to urge his spirit energy to disperse the black light attached to the saber, but it was to no avail. That layer of black light didn't seem to be anything substantial, but in fact, it was countless tiny and strange black sand. Each grain was very heavy. This should be something that Zhu Hou had specially refined to deal with the treasures of cultivators. Whether it was the weapon of a weapon cultivator or the flying sword of a sword cultivator, once it was contaminated, it would be impossible to use it freely. From this point of view, any cultivator who needed to rely on the spirit treasure in their hands to display their full strength would not have an advantage against this Zhu Hou. Sure enough, the starry sky was vast and full of strange things. Lu Yi had fought with cultivators of various races before, and he had always been able to broaden his horizons. He had thought that he was experienced and knowledgeable, but who would have thought that he was still ignorant? It was undeniable that this black sand was a strange object, but Lu Yi didn't know what it was exactly. Without thinking too much, he raised his eyes to look at Zhu Ho, who had finally stood up not far away. Lu Ye's hand loosened, and the Pan Shan saber fell straight down. Zhu Ho was dumbfounded. In the past, he had used his own unique method to deal with weapon cultivators. Every time, he would make those people flustered because no weapon cultivator would easily abandon their weapon. What kind of weapon cultivator would a weapon cultivator without a weapon be called a weapon cultivator? In particular, the weapons of weapon cultivators had generally followed the weapon cultivator for many years. They were an extension of the weapon cultivator's body and could not be easily abandoned. He could use this point to put the weapon cultivator in a dilemma, control the rhythm of the battle, and then decide their life and death. However, what he saw in front of him was obviously a little abnormal. The weapon cultivator opposite him had actually thrown away his long saber so easily. If the saber is here, the man will be here. If the saber is lost, the man will die. Where is the pride and persistence of you weapon cultivators? Boom, when a loud sound rang out, the Pan Shan saber that fell from the sky smashed into the valley below like a meteorite. The huge impact caused cracks to appear in the ground, strong winds to blow, and the trees to sway. At the same time, Zhu Ho's body was swaying. Without him, Lu Yi had already rushed in front of the other party. He took out a short pestle in each hand. It was the 2 spirit treasures from the arachnid expert Yan Ji. Without the Pan Shan saber, he could not use his full strength, but if it was just to deal with a body cultivator, it didn't matter whether he had the Pan Shan saber or not. In any case, it was just a close combat, and one person could defeat 10 people. The 2 short pestles turned into afterimages as they smashed towards Zhu Ho. He had not refined these 2 spirit treasures, so he was unable to activate the restrictions within them. The only thing he could display was the support of his own strength. Zhu Ho raised his arm to block and punched back with his other hand. The spirit power and blood in his body surged wildly. At first, he could still fight back, but he soon realized that something was wrong. Compared to him, an orthodox body cultivator, the weapon cultivator opposite him surpassed him in speed and strength. This forced him to defend with all his strength. Clanging sounds kept echoing in the valley. It had to be said that the body of a body cultivator was really tough. Even Lu Ye's crazy attacks were all blocked by him. The feedback of the attacks hitting his body made Lu Yi feel as if he had hit an impenetrable wall. When the cultivator's cultivation was low, the body cultivator's physique was stronger than that of other factions, but the advantage was not too obvious. However, as the cultivation increased, the benefits of a strong physique would become greater and greater. At the level of the Spirit Sea realm, the body cultivator's body was the spirit treasure they relied on the most. Therefore, cultivators at this level would rarely use defensive treasures, because the defensive strength of those treasures might not be stronger than their physique. In battle, they would have to spend a lot of effort to activate the power of the treasures. The gains did not make up for the losses. But this did not mean that body cultivators did not have defensive spirit treasures. They always had to prepare 1 or 2 in case of emergency. Zhu Gu also had a defensive spirit treasure on him. Seeing that the situation was not good, he immediately urged it out and turned it into a shield to cover his body. In an instant, his whole body became bright, as if covered in a layer of golden light. But this layer of golden light only lasted for less than 10 breaths of time before it broke. No matter how strong the defense was, it could not withstand such an endless bombardment, and such a violent and brute force bombardment. The moment the golden light shattered, a look of despair flashed across Zhu Nao's eyes. He knew that this trip would not bode well for him. In the past, every weapon that could restrain a weapon cultivator had been successful, but this time, the boat had capsized in the dish. Sure enough, there was an old saying that if you often walk by the river, your shoes will get wet. With a cracking sound, Zhu Ji's arms were broken, and his face showed a painful expression. With this blow, his solid blood and chi protection was also turbulent. Like the last straw that broke the camel's back, His original perseverance and resistance turned into a total collapse at this moment. His face showed a fierce expression, and instead of retreating, he opened his broken arms, as if he wanted to hug Lu Yi. Looking at his appearance, it was clear that even if he was going to die, he would still bite Lu Yi. How could Lu Yi let him do as he wished? As his figure lightly floated back, he waved the two short pestles in his hands even more fiercely, and they were all aimed at his head. When the last pestle fell, Zhuji's head suddenly burst open, and a rain of blood splattered all over the sky, like a blooming blood rose. Chapter 1256. Now that Zhu Gu was dead, Lu Yi turned his head and looked in a certain direction. In that direction, a figure suddenly appeared and turned into a stream of light, quickly fleeing into the distance. Looking at the figure, it was the female cultivator who had fled before. This woman had sneaked back at some unknown time and was hiding nearby. Obviously, she wanted to be the oriole behind the mantis stalking the cicada. If she was lucky, she could wait for Lu Yi and Zhu Gu to fight until both sides were injured. Then, she might be able to get 2 easy harvests. But what she didn't expect was that the battle was one-sided from the beginning. Zhu Gu couldn't fight back under the unreasonable suppression of the weapon cultivator and was beaten to death. Moreover, she clearly saw that the weapon cultivator had abandoned his long saber from the beginning and used 2 unrefined short pestle spirit artifacts instead. In other words, the weapon cultivator didn't use his full strength at all. If the weapon cultivator had his long saber, she didn't know what kind of crushing situation it would be. Watching the battle, the female cultivator's mind was undoubtedly shaken. She had felt Lu Ye's strength before, so she decisively left. But she didn't give up, thinking that she could take advantage of the situation, so she sneaked back. But after a glance, she realized that the weapon cultivator's strength was far beyond her expectations. Zhu Ji's strength was definitely not weak. Among this group of Spirit Sea Realm cultivators, he was at least above average. But in front of the weapon cultivator, he was still beaten like a child. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, the female cultivator wouldn't have believed that such a thing could happen in this world. Where did this freak come from? What shocked her even more was that he was only an 8th Order Spirit Sea Realm cultivator. So when Lu Yi turned his head and looked at her, she didn't dare to hesitate and immediately fled. This time she really left. In the 3-person team, the ghost cultivator died mysteriously and Zhu Gu was smashed to death. She didn't want to follow in her companion's footsteps. Looking in the direction the female cultivator fled, Lu Yi didn't chase. The main reason was that the mountain coiling saber was still underground. He had to take it back. Otherwise, if someone else picked it up, it would be too late to cry. 2 inches of flash, he rushed to the place where the mountain coiling saber fell. Only the hilt was exposed on the ground, the entire saber was stuck in the ground. Cracks appeared on the ground around his heart. When he pulled out the mountain pan saber, he could still feel its heavy weight. Earlier, he had tried to disperse the black light on the saber but failed. Now that he tried again, there were no more obstacles. The essence of the black light was extremely fine black sand. Each grain was as fine as a speck of dust, but each grain was incomparably heavy. It was refined by Zhu Gu to restrain the sharp blades of cultivators. Now that Zhu Gu was dead, there was no one to control the black light. It wasn't too difficult to disperse it. Lu Yi spent some time to disperse the black light. Only then did the Pan Mountain saber return to its original appearance. He also put away the black sand. This thing's quality was obviously not bad. He could sell it when the time came, or add a little bit of it when forging the Pan Mountain saber. It would increase the weight of the Pan Mountain saber to suit his own strength. The last time the coiling mountain saber had been upgraded was a long time ago. Ever since Lu Yi had reached the Divine Sea Realm, his cultivation had rapidly risen. The quality of the coiling mountain saber could be improved by fusing with the soul-severing saber, allowing it to meet Lu Ye's requirements at any time. But the quality of the coiling mountain saber itself was unable to keep up with Lu Ye's cultivation. Disregarding everything else, just the weight alone was barely satisfactory. Lu Yi estimated that after he reached the constellation realm, The current coiling mountain saber would no longer be able to meet the requirements of his cultivation. Therefore, when that time came, it would be necessary to forge it. After a slight delay, Lu Yi leaped in the direction of the treasured gourd. Previously, a large number of cultivators had already chased after it. He didn't know what the situation was now. However, with so many people gathered together, the treasured gourd had only dried up. If he wanted to snatch it, the difficulty would not be ordinary. When the time came for a battle, chaos would definitely occur. As he flew, he sensed the situation on the clone's side. At this moment, the clone was hibernating in a hidden place thousands of miles away. He had even set up a large formation to conceal his existence. When the nearby cultivators were attracted by the treasured gourd's phenomenon, it was very difficult for others to discover him. At this moment, the sword gourd at the clone's waist was rhythmically vibrating without a doubt. The sword gourd came from the fortune vine. It was a supreme treasure. Therefore, when the fortune vine appeared, the sword gourd could sense it and lead the clone to rush over. However, before that, it was just a guide. In fact, even without this guide, as long as Lu Yi was nearby, he would be able to see the magnificent and eye-catching phenomenon. Hundreds of cultivators had been gathered like this. However, after the treasured gourd on the fortune vine matured and fell off, the sword gourd had a different reaction. Just like now, it was gently vibrating rhythmically. Moreover, the clone could clearly feel that the sword gourd was about to leave him and fly forward. However, this trend was not strong, and the clone easily suppressed it. When he recalled that the treasured gourd had flown in the direction of the clone when it fell, Lu Yi could not help but have an exciting thought in his heart. Could it be that the treasured gourd that had just appeared was going to fly to the clone? All treasures had their own spirits. Even if they had different effects, they still came from the same source, and it was normal for them to be attracted to each other. Now that the fortune vine had disappeared, the newly born treasured gourd was in a state of no return. In such a state, it would naturally be attracted by the aura of the same source. Honestly speaking, Lu Yi did not have much interest in the treasured gourd. Although it was a good item, one's strength was not the only thing that tested one's ability to obtain such a precious treasure in front of hundreds of people. The reason he'd stayed here until now was firstly because of coincidences and fortuitous encounters, and it was a rare opportunity that allowed him to broaden his horizons and gain knowledge. Secondly, it was to see if there was an opportunity to eliminate some of his competitors and obtain more gains. He only had a casual attitude towards the treasured gourd. He believed that most cultivators had the same idea. If one was lucky enough to obtain a treasured gourd, it would be best. The value of such an item was enough to make any cultivator withdraw from the Alpha Origin stage and give up on the fight for a spot in the top 100. However, the situation had changed. The treasured gourd had formed a connection with his sword gourd, and Lu Yi could not help but think more about it. Compared to the others, the doppelganger's side undoubtedly had a unique advantage. This was something that Lu Yi had not expected. But how was he going to steal the treasured gourd from under the noses of hundreds of people without any worries? Snatching it by force would definitely not work. Even if he succeeded, he would become the target of public criticism. When that happened, he would become the target of everyone in the Alpha Origin stage, and no one would be able to resist unless they left the Alpha Origin stage in advance. This was not what Lu Yi wanted. He now had some thoughts about the treasured gourd, and he definitely had to obtain a spot in the top 100. He could only think of a way. Of course, it would be perfect if the treasured gourd could directly fly to the clone's side. A group of people would chase after the treasured gourd, and the clone could directly teleport to the main body's side to shake them off. The clone could then activate the Thousand Faces spirit rune to change its appearance in advance, and no one would know that Lu Yi had obtained such a precious treasure. However, the treasured gourd still had not flown to the clone's side despite the distance of 1,000 miles. It was obvious that something had gone wrong. Lu Yi soon knew where the problem was. After flying less than 200 miles, he saw hundreds of cultivators forming a large circle in the sky. There was a treasure light rushing left and right, but it was blocked by the cultivators. That treasure light was obviously the treasured gourd. At first glance, it seemed that hundreds of cultivators were sincerely united to suppress the treasured gourd, but that was not the case at all. While these cultivators were intercepting the treasured gourd, they were also attacking each other. However, their attacks were relatively restrained, and there were not many casualties. In such a situation, no one was willing to fight to the point where both sides suffered losses and let others benefit from it. Moreover, the strange thing was that the numerous cultivators were clearly attracted by the treasured gourd's phenomenon, but no one dared to touch it at this time. This was a lesson learned from the mistakes of others. Before Lu Yi arrived, there were several people who didn't have eyes. The moment they tried to snatch the gourd, they were attacked from all directions and had their divine souls destroyed. In such a chaotic scene, it was hard to tell who was the one who did it. Therefore, the cultivators' response was the current situation. They only intercepted the treasured gourd and did not touch it. Such a situation gave every cultivator a headache. With treasures in front of them, it was impossible not to be tempted. That was impossible, but it would be useless even if he had the life to use it. No one knew how long such a situation would last, but it was certain that it would not last for long. This was because this was the inner circle of the alpha origin stage. Once a certain time limit was reached, the cultivators would no longer be able to stay in this position. At that time, this tight defensive circle would inevitably collapse. When Lu Yi arrived, he did not attract much attention. Most cultivators' attention was now attracted by others, so who would pay attention to others? Moreover, Lu Yi did not go forward and only watched from afar, making it even more difficult to attract the attention of others. After watching for a while, he had a general understanding of the current situation, and a plan slowly took shape in his mind. His clone had a natural advantage in snatching the treasured gourd, so what he needed to do now was very simple. He needed to break this impenetrable defensive circle and give the treasured gourd a chance to rush out. As long as the treasured gourd could rush out, it would most likely fly in the direction of his clone. At that time, his clone would be able to directly collect it. But before that, he needed to make some arrangements. After all, if his clone succeeded, he would have to face the pursuit of hundreds of cultivators. If there was no one around the main body, his clone could directly teleport over. However, Lu Yi could not determine the exact situation, so it was safer to make some arrangements in advance. With this thought, Lu Yi turned around and left. At the same time, his clone began to get busy. The situation here would not change much in the short term. Calculating the time, the alpha origin stage's range of activity should be reduced in 2 days. At that time, no one would be able to stay here. Therefore, Lu Yi had to act before then, lest something unexpected happened. Chapter 1257. This arrangement took less than half a day, and Lu Yi once again headed towards where the cultivators were gathered. 150 kilometers away, he stopped and watched from afar. He could clearly see the situation there. Hundreds of cultivators had formed a large circle, and the gourd's light was charging left and right, but it was unable to break free. Lu Yi had no idea how to break through this large circle's defenses. He had some considerations. If he just charged in and drank, the cultivators there would undoubtedly be one. Now, the cultivators there were all silent, and they were all in groups of 2 or 3, looking after each other. If he went alone, he would definitely be surrounded and attacked. As such, he needed a strong and advantageous assault, one that would strike fear into the cultivators there. Only then would he have a chance of success. Lu Yi had such a method, but it was not easy to use it normally, because the situation in a battle was constantly changing, and there was no room for him to use it. However, it was the most appropriate method to use here. 50 kilometers away, a fixed target, and enough time and space to build up power. That would be, let's make a big scene. Lu Yi felt a sense of excitement that he hadn't felt in a long time. Deep in his bones, he loved the thrill and madness. Back when his cultivation base was low, he had fought in the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield, where he had single-handedly fought against a large number of enemies. Every time he succeeded, he would retreat. But as his cultivation base grew higher, and his fame grew, he gradually lost the fun. One now was a good opportunity. He flew through the air. At first, he was not very fast, but as he advanced, his spiritual power and chi blood began to boil, and his speed became faster and faster. 5 kilometers later, his figure had already turned into a fiery red stream of light, like a flying meteorite. Spiritual light flashed on the surface of his body, and countless yin and yang elements began to appear, intertwining with each other and gradually submerging his body. After 20 kilometers, Lu Yi had completely disappeared, replaced by a huge, fiery red egg. The surface of the egg was covered with red lines that looked like lava, and it seemed to have a life of its own. It expanded and contracted as Lu Yi charged forward, as if it was breathing. The aura within 15 kilometers was even stronger, and the fiery red egg had also grown larger. The breathing of life that was about to be born had also become more obvious. When the fiery red egg streaked across the sky, it left a pitch-black mark along the way, as if even space itself was being burned. 70. The hundreds of cultivators who had gathered in a circle finally felt that something was wrong, because an inexplicable sense of foreboding suddenly appeared in their hearts, as if a great danger was about to befall them. This was especially true for the cultivators near Lu Ye's direction. As early as when Lu Yi was still 50 li away, they had already sensed it, but no one knew what was going on. Now, this sense of foreboding was getting stronger and clearer. "What's that?" Someone cried out in alarm. It was the cultivator who was facing Lu Yi. Although everyone's attention was focused on the treasured gourd and the enemies around them, such a phenomenon was hard to miss. As his voice fell, everyone looked over, only to see a fiery red stream of light hurtling towards them. Through the cover of the stream of light, they could vaguely see the shape of a large egg. This sudden change confused most people, but there were also some knowledgeable cultivators who saw the truth at a glance. A secret technique? Although they didn't know what kind of secret technique it was, there was a rumbling momentum just by approaching it, so its power couldn't be small. Since it was a secret technique, there must be someone who used it. Now, it seemed that the person who used the technique was hiding in the large egg. "This person wants to steal the treasure," someone shouted angrily. This made everyone furious. Hundreds of cultivators gathered here, and after a long time, they still couldn't decide who the treasured gourd belonged to. This was because although the scene wasn't chaotic, once someone tried to steal it, they would inevitably be targeted and attacked by others. Because of this, many people had already died. They were suffering bitterly and fighting to the death, but someone actually came in such a rude and unreasonable way, wanting to steal the treasure? It was undeniable that the other party's momentum was rumbling and strong, making everyone feel a sense of crisis. However, as the top monstrous geniuses of the various large realms, their willpower wasn't so easily taken away. If they scattered because of fear, it would only benefit this sneaky guy who suddenly appeared. The other party hid his body in the large egg and didn't even dare to reveal his true face. So what qualifications did he have to steal the treasure? Under such circumstances, if the treasured gourd was stolen by someone, they didn't deserve to be called monstrous geniuses of their respective realms. Therefore, even if they were secretly surprised by the method used by the newcomer, no one retreated. In fact, they even had some thoughts of joining forces with the enemy. No matter who obtained the treasured gourd in the end, it would be one of the hundreds of people present. Outsiders shouldn't even think about interfering. A figure stepped out from the crowd and came to the periphery of the large circle. He faced the direction of the red light and said in a clear voice, "I am Yao Tian Nen Xiong. Are there any fellow Taoists willing to lend me a hand and stop this person?" At this juncture of joining forces with the enemy, they only lacked a leader. Yao Tian Realm's Nen Xiong stepped out at the right time. He had the strength and qualifications to do so. Yao Tian Realm was one of the top realms. In the entire starry sky, among the realms controlled by the human race, it was only slightly inferior to Huang Dragon Realm. If Gu Yulo was here, he would naturally step out. However, Gu Yulo wasn't here, so Nen Xiong was duty-bound. He was a decisive person. Since he realized this point, he naturally stood out. There were many followers. Among the hundreds of cultivators, more than 30 immediately stood out and stood behind Nen Xiong. They looked as if they were following his lead. The experts gathered, and their aura soared to the heavens. It wasn't that there weren't more people who wanted to step out. However, since they wanted to stop the treasured gourd, it was obvious that spell cultivators and sword cultivators were more suitable. This was because they could use their techniques from afar, and the other factions were slightly inferior. Moreover, they had to leave enough people to form a circle to prevent the treasured gourd from escaping. Therefore, at this moment, those who stood behind Nanxiong were mostly spell cultivators and sword cultivators. There was no need to say anything. Nanxiong took the lead. Streaks of colorful light mixed with whistling flying swords flew towards the incoming red light. 80 kilometers away, the large egg Lu Yi had transformed crashed into a storm of spells and sword energy, and immediately felt a tremendous amount of pressure. Fortunately, the large egg itself was equipped with a strong defense. Moreover, it had been accumulating power for 80 miles and Lu Ye's crazy infusion of spiritual power. It wasn't easy to stop it. Once the attack was launched, it was endless and showed no signs of stopping. Under everyone's watchful eyes, cracks appeared on the surface of the large egg. It looked as if it was about to shatter. Seeing this, everyone relaxed. It seemed that the other party's method was just for show. It looked powerful, but in reality, it was useless. However, this was also related to the strength of everyone. Each of them had a strong foundation. Looking at the vast starry sky, which divine sea realm cultivator could stop them? They wanted to see just who had eaten the heart of a bear and the courage of a leopard to dare act like this. 90 miles away, the large fiery red egg's surface was covered in cracks and cracking sounds constantly rang out. It looked as if it would shatter at any moment. Someone sneered, overestimating himself. They secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, Nanxiong had stepped forward. Otherwise, with just a few people, they wouldn't have been able to stop such an attack. Someone shouted, "Put in more effort, he can't hold on any longer." As soon as he finished speaking, a crashing sound rang out. The fiery red egg was finally unable to withstand the barrage of attacks and shattered. Some people laughed while others stared, wanting to see the true face of the person hiding behind it. Only a few cultivators with good eyesight felt that something was wrong, including the leader, Nanxiong. This was because he faintly sensed that the large egg's shattering wasn't completely the result of their interception, but rather the other party's initiative. But he didn't have the time to think carefully because at the instant the egg shattered, a clear and resounding cry resounded through the sky, and it was deafening to the ears. Accompanying this cry was a large expanse of fiery red light that suddenly spread out. Everyone's eyes abruptly shrank. At a glance, it was the figure of a noble giant bird with a wingspan of 100 feet. Its entire body was covered in raging flames. With a light flap of its wings, it whizzed past 10 miles, as if even the sky was about to ignite. A fire phoenix! Someone cried out in alarm. They had originally thought that there was someone hiding inside the large egg, but in the end, the egg had shattered. Instead of a scoundrel, they saw the 4 sacred beasts. The Alpha origin stage. How could there be an existence like a fire phoenix? Huge doubts surfaced in everyone's hearts. Nanxiong gritted his teeth and shouted, "It's not a fire phoenix, it's just a secret technique." Although the fire phoenix looked extremely lifelike at first glance, as if it was a real living creature, he could still see some flaws. It wasn't a fire phoenix at all, but an external manifestation of a secret technique. It was also possible for cultivators to display techniques like the fire phoenix, but compared to the one in front of him, whether it was in terms of grandeur or scale, it was far inferior. This was not a fire phoenix technique that a spirit sea realm cultivator could display. Perhaps a constellation realm cultivator could, but it was only a possibility. Although Nanxiong reminded everyone, the veins on his forehead still bulged. Was this really the work of someone who had participated in the battle for the spirit sea realm? Who could it be? It had to be said that there was nothing wrong with his considerations. It was indeed impossible for anyone in the spirit sea realm to display a fire phoenix technique of such a scale. Lu Yi couldn't do it either, but if he was given enough time to gather his strength, he could make the impossible possible. When his cultivation wasn't high enough, this fire phoenix technique would have been enough to drain his spirit energy. Now that he was an 8th order divine sea realm cultivator, he could use it at will, but in order to ensure the power of this technique, Lu Yi had poured most of his spirit energy into it. In any case, it was easy for him to restore his spirit energy, so he didn't have to worry about his lack of spirit energy affecting his subsequent plans. This was why he had created this massive fire phoenix. 3. Chapter 1258. The majestic fire phoenix flapped its wings and flew over, accompanied by a loud cry. A powerful pressure suddenly filled the air. It was a pressure that only a constellation realm cultivator could possess. It was unknown whether the pressure was too strong or the heat wave was too strong, but even the void was distorted by it. The hundreds of cultivators were all shaken. The cultivators who came here were all resolute and strong-willed, so they would not be easily disturbed. However, pressure was real. Thus, when they sensed the pressure that clearly belonged to a constellation realm cultivator, everyone's heart skipped a beat. What was going on? How could a constellation realm cultivator appear in a group of spirit sea realm cultivators? This was all thanks to Lu Ye's pseudo-pressure spirit rune. With his current 8th order divine sea realm foundation, it was easy for him to activate this pseudo-pressure spirit rune and simulate the pressure of a constellation realm cultivator. Originally, he had planned to simulate Yu Yao's aura as well. That way, he would be able to scare these people away without any effort. But on second thought, although the Yu Yao realm's pressure was more intimidating, it was also more vulnerable, so a constellation realm cultivator was the most suitable. In the last few kilometers, Lu Yi, who was hiding in the giant fire phoenix's shadow, could already sense that some cultivators had used their escape techniques and were fleeing in all directions. Such a magnificent secret technique alone wasn't enough to scare them away. But if a constellation realm cultivator really made a move, the situation would be different. No one could understand how a constellation realm cultivator could appear in this place. Nan Xiong didn't retreat. Not only did he not retreat, he even activated his secret technique and attacked the fire phoenix, shouting, "Don't be scared by him. Let's join forces. Even if he's a real constellation realm cultivator, we can still fight him." It had to be said that this kind of monstrous talent from a top domain had a particularly tenacious heart. Of course, this probably had something to do with his determination to obtain the gourd. Coming from a top domain like the Heavenly Yao domain, just winning the battle of the Divine Sea was not enough to prove his ability. If he could bring back a gourd for his domain in this battle, it would be a truly great achievement. At that time, he would certainly be appreciated by the elders of his domain and would be of great benefit to his future. He had already secretly made arrangements for the owner of the gourd. He didn't dare to say that he was 90% certain, but at the very least, he had a very high chance. As long as the situation continued to develop like this, he had a 60% chance of snatching the gourd away. This was also the reason why he was the first to step forward when he sensed the impending crisis. He had to ensure that there would not be any unexpected twists and turns that would affect his plan. Naturally, it was impossible for him to retreat so easily. As soon as he shouted, several people immediately followed suit and attacked. These were all his secret helpers. For a cultivator from a top domain like him, it was very easy for him to rope in some helpers. This was especially true for some domains that had good relations with the Heavenly Yao domain. As soon as they attacked, they immediately sensed that something was wrong. This was because as their techniques blasted the fire phoenix's body, they felt a very strange feedback from their spirit force. One Nanxiong was furious and shouted again, "This is not the constellation stage, it's just a smokescreen. Everyone, don't be fooled by him." No wonder there was a constellation stage cultivator in the Alpha Origin stage. It turned out that it was just a special method. The fake might was indeed just a smokescreen. It looked scary, but in fact, it could be seen through. It was fine if no one attacked the fire phoenix, but once it did, someone as astute as Nanxiong could easily make a clear judgment. Lu Yi had only activated the fake might as an experiment. It would naturally be best if it was effective, but it didn't matter if it wasn't, but he didn't expect it to be seen through so quickly. through the fire phoenix's figure, he glanced indifferently at Nanxiong. This guy, he had to remember this. Following Nanxiong's attacks and shouts, more and more people stabilized their bodies and began to attack. In an instant, more techniques and flying swords than before were unleashed. The fire phoenix's spirit force surged, and its energy became chaotic. After a few kilometers, its huge body shrank again and again. This was the direct result of being attacked. It shrank in size to maintain its body. In a short period of time, its body had shrunk by more than 30%. Nanxiong and the others at the front couldn't stay any longer. Although he had seen through Lu Ye's trick and had led the others to intercept it, the distance between them was still too short. If they had been 5 kilometers further, he was confident that he would have been able to intercept the fire phoenix. But now was not the time. There was one thing he couldn't do otherwise. Among the Divine Sea stage, this secret technique was indeed terrifying and difficult to resist. Therefore, the moment before the fire phoenix pounced into the crowd, the many cultivators could only temporarily avoid it and escape to the left and right. The bird's cry sounded again, like the final struggle of life. Even though its body had shrunk, the fire phoenix, whose wingspan was still dozens of meters, crashed into the large circle formed by hundreds of cultivators. Everyone was retreating. The large circle, which was originally tightly guarded, was immediately shattered. With a loud bang, spirit force surged and the huge fire phoenix collapsed. In the process of pouncing into the large circle, it had been attacked by too many people and could no longer maintain it. The fiery red spirit force spread out in all directions, and flames rushed to the sky. A cultivator was wrapped in it, shouting and cursing endlessly. The scene was chaotic. Some people were injured, but more people were safe. Even if they were injured, their injuries weren't serious. After all, so many people bore the pressure of the fire phoenix's final explosion together. They wouldn't lose their lives because of it. 3 among the dust, someone spread out his spirit force to search for the treasured gourd. In such a chaotic situation, the tight encirclement could no longer be maintained. At the last moment, the treasured gourd had escaped at an extremely fast speed. It wasn't just one cultivator who discovered the situation, but a group of cultivators. These people didn't care too much and hurriedly chased after it. However, at this moment, an extremely fierce and violent aura suddenly appeared, as if an ancient beast that had been imprisoned for 10,000 years had broken free. One among the flames in the sky, a sharp saber light suddenly appeared. When facing these people, Wenwen's men were busy, Maikong Li and Ling Country's second block were also in a state of confusion. Some used their methods to block, while others dodged. The already chaotic situation became even more chaotic. In such a chaotic situation, everyone's eyes were focused. The light quickly gathered in one place, where the fire phoenix's final explosion was. The flames there were quickly extinguished, and a twisted and tall figure swayed in the flames, with 2 bloodthirsty red spots slightly rippling. In the next moment, the figure's true face was imprinted in everyone's vision, and everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It was a scarlet figure that was 3 feet tall. The patterns of the remarkable bull temple formed a totem. Just by looking at it, it gave people an extremely wild sense of oppression. The figure was slender and didn't have any burdens. It just stood there quietly, but it was like a natural moat, blocking everyone's path. Of course, what was even more attractive was the long blade with an exaggerated and unique shape. It was protruding like a piece of bamboo, but anyone with a little knowledge would be able to tell that it was not bamboo at all. It was the spine of some kind of ferocious beast. The ferocious aura emanating from it undoubtedly indicated that this ferocious beast was not some unknown creature. Yen armor. And it was a human-shaped full-body armor. Everyone's expression became astonished. Because of the fire phoenix from before, everyone instinctively thought that the one hiding in it must be a cultivator without magic power. In the end, the fire phoenix was just an external manifestation of the spell. Furthermore, there was no doubt that activating such a spell would be a huge burden for any Divine Sea Realm cultivator. It could be said that anyone who used such a spell would have their strength greatly reduced. Therefore, after the Fire Phoenix collapsed, some cultivators felt that the initiator of the Fire Phoenix would definitely die without a burial ground, but they didn't know who would benefit in the end. Who knew that not only did he not die, but he also wore such a suit of yen armor. Judging from the saber light just now, this guy didn't seem to be only proficient in spells. Many thoughts flashed through their minds, but some cultivators were too lazy to think too much. They gathered here for the treasured gourd. The treasured gourd had already run away, so why waste time here? Therefore, his figure flashed and he chased outside. However, just as he moved, Yan Jia, who was quietly standing in the same place, also moved. Although his figure was tall, his speed was as fast as the wind. It seemed that in just a flash he blocked in front of the person. On both sides of his cheeks, there were two scarlet lights floating behind him. That was the scarlet light in his eyes. He raised the long saber in his hand and lightly chopped down, the silhouette being turned pale with fright. He hurriedly activated his defensive spirit treasure to protect his body. At the same time he shouted, "Fellow Taoist, why are you doing this?" He didn't want to attack Yan Jia. He just wanted to chase after the treasured gourd. How did he offend the other party? When the long saber chopped down, a good defensive spirit treasure was shattered. Blood spurted out, and the corpse was separated into two halves. The cut was neat and tidy. There was no fancy technique, nor was there any loud noise. It was just a simple slash, and a top genius of a realm was cut open like a piece of paper. But it was precisely because of this simplicity that it was even more shocking. The hundreds of cultivators present couldn't help but feel their eyelids twitch. Lu Yi also didn't expect that with the increase of his strength, wearing the dragon throne would bring such a huge improvement. He hadn't used the dragon throne to kill an enemy for a long time. He didn't know how high the upper limit of this Yen Jia from the soaring dragon continent's sealed world was. He only knew that it was an alien object. When he wore it when he was in the Cloud River realm, his vitality was depleted after a full-strength attack, and he almost died in the sealed world. After breaking through to the true lake and divine sea realm, Yang Kai still felt a huge burden on his body. Now that he had reached the 8th order divine sea realm, it was still a great burden. After he put on the dragon throne, Yang Kai felt that his entire foundation was being rapidly absorbed. This undoubtedly meant that the divine sea realm was still not enough to fully control this Yen Jia. 9. Chapter 1259. Come to think of it, it was not strange. The Dragon Emperor was made entirely out of dragon scales, so its quality must be extremely high. How could it be so easy to control? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, it was not good to reveal his true appearance. The Dragon Emperor's armor was the best cover. What Lu Yi needed to do now was very simple. He needed to hold these people back for at least 10 breaths of time. Only then would the escaping gourd be able to escape far enough. Moreover, his clone had already begun to move, and was heading in the direction of the gourd. If nothing went wrong, 10 breaths of time would be enough for the clone to retrieve the gourd. Fighting against hundreds of monstrous cultivators from different realms alone, even with the Fire Phoenix's charge and the Dragon Emperor's deterrence, was an extremely difficult task. Killing one person with a saber undoubtedly produced a good effect, because even Nan Xiong would not be able to kill his enemies so cleanly. The attitude of this guy in full armor who suddenly appeared was very clear. Whoever dared to chase after the gourd would suffer. But why? If he wanted to fight for the gourd, it was understandable. Such a precious treasure would tempt anyone. However, everything he did since he appeared was just to cause trouble. Cui Dong had used a powerful art to break the encirclement of the crowd, allowing the trapped gourd to escape. Now, he was blocking their path, preventing them from chasing after it. This was harming others without benefiting himself. Many people could not understand. Time suddenly passed extremely slowly. After a full 3 breaths, a furious roar was heard. "Those who block my path will die." As soon as he finished speaking, 3 cone-like arts blasted toward Lu Yi. Following closely behind these 3 cones was the figure of Nan Xiong from the Heavenly Yao realm. As an art cultivator, he should not act so rashly. After all, art cultivators should hide and cast their arts from afar. However, he vaguely sensed that something was wrong. This guy in full armor probably had companions waiting for him outside. If he caused a ruckus here and let the gourd escape, his companions would be able to intercept the escaping treasure. If the crowd continued to be in a deadlock with him, they would be falling into his trap. He didn't have time to explain the situation to the others, so he could only take the lead. He believed that the people present were not fools, and many of them could see this point. The reason why they didn't act rashly was not entirely because they were afraid, but because they needed someone to take the lead. Therefore, he stood up and used practical actions to express his attitude. Sure enough, after he made his move, his followers gathered and attacked one after another. One figure after another followed closely behind him and attacked forward, surrounding Lu Yi. Lu Yi sighed inwardly. He knew that things wouldn't go so smoothly. Fortunately, he was able to delay them for a few breaths of time, so it wasn't completely useless. He didn't choose to dodge when faced with such a concentrated attack. Dodging was useless, so he could only face it head-on. The Dragon Ridge saber danced in the air. The several feet-long saber was filled with violence and aggression. Many attacks were shattered before they could even get close. However, there were still more that landed on his body, making loud banging noises. The defense of the dragon throne made from dragon scales was extremely shocking. It wasn't something that a divine sea cultivator could casually shake. However, the impact of the attacks couldn't be dispelled. Lu Yi had to bear it himself. In just 2 breaths of time, Lu Yi felt as if his bones were about to fall apart. His organs were shaking violently. The only thing worth being happy about was that not all the cultivators chose to attack him, because more people had already bypassed him and went after the gourd. He couldn't do anything about these people. No matter how good one person was, he couldn't stop everyone here. He stared at the most popular row of peach blossom. Suddenly he felt a chill, because he sensed that Xiong Yu's chi was locked onto him. Only seeing a saber Zhou Zhaoqiu coming towards him, he no longer dared to charge forward, but the star bending sideways, he opened the pick rippling force, but that saber Zhou Zhaoqiu was like a bone-attached teacher, unable to move forward. Everyone go quickly and try. At this critical juncture of life and death, the powerful foundation of being born in a top-level domain was displayed. Even though he was a magic cultivator, he did not panic in the face of such a crisis. His expression was as calm as ever, and as he unleashed one technique after another to counterattack, he also added layers of protection to himself. He moved around in an extremely small area, and at first glance, it was as if he was dancing on the tip of a knife. It was extremely exciting. At the same time, Lu Yi was still enduring attacks from all directions. The sound of the dragon throne being bombarded didn't stop since the beginning. But soon, the number of people attacking him decreased greatly. For the cultivators gathered here, fighting each other to the death was not the main goal. Not to mention, this guy in full body armor was not easy to kill. There was no personal grudge between them, so there was no reason for them to be entangled with each other. They were still more interested in the gourd. Therefore, after a short confrontation, after breaking through Lu Ye's defense, more and more people jumped over him and went after the gourd. After a few breaths of time, there were less than 10 people left on the battlefield. The rest had fled to Yao Yao. Those who remained could be regarded as Nan Xiong's allies. There were members of his team that he had secretly recruited, and there were also monsters from other domains that had a good relationship with the Heavenly Yao domain. This was the advantage of being born in a top-level domain. Wherever one went, there would be no shortage of friends. This was because many large domains were protected by top-level domains to some extent. Take Yu Yaorao's group of 3 as an example. The reason they were able to form an alliance here was because Yu Yaorao's 9 Profound World and Ding Yu's Profound Crossing World were nominally subordinate to Zhao Yunliu's Conqueror Star. Of course, because of the great distance between the starry sky, this relationship was only nominally. There was no actual command. But if the 9 Mysteries domain or the Xiandu world encountered a crisis that they couldn't deal with, the 2 domains could ask the Conqueror Star for help. The Conqueror Star would also send experts to help if it was possible. The relationship between the various domains in the starry sky was extremely complicated. The cultivators of the 9 provinces had just stepped into the starry sky and didn't know much about this. It wasn't that the dozen people didn't want to leave, but that they couldn't. Nan Xiong was being targeted. This guy had spoiled his plans twice. If Lu Yi didn't target him, who would he target? His plan this time wasn't perfect, but if Nan Xiong didn't take the lead, it could create a longer time gap. But because Nan Xiong jumped out again and again, he led the others to break his fire wind by a large margin. Now, it was unknown how many days it would take for his clone to reach. Since he was the one who jumped the most, he had to suffer the most vicious beating. Nan Xiong had always been dancing on the tip of the blade. Since he started cultivating, he had never experienced such a sullen experience. He was the most outstanding Divine Sea Realm cultivator of this generation in the Heavenly Yao domain. Not to mention this domain, even in the starry sky, there were few opponents among his peers. His opponents were only the other evildoers from the top domains, so he had never thought that he would be in such a sullen situation one day. It was a situation where he could only take a beating without a chance to fight back. And this was in the situation where there were others helping him. There was only one question he wanted to know now. Who the hell was inside the armor? Moreover, this armor, the quality was a little too high. Which domain guy brought such a treasure into the Alpha Origin stage? Wasn't he afraid of dying and losing it here? Although he was in a difficult situation, he still had a discerning eye. He knew that the other party was so powerful not only because of his strength, but also because of the enhancement brought by the armor. If not for the armor's powerful protection, with so many people attacking together, he would have been taken down long ago. But it was precisely because of the armor's powerful protection that his opponent could completely ignore the attacks of others and only target him. While Lu Ye's main body was chasing after Nan Xiong, his clone hurriedly flew all the way and finally met the treasure gourd flying towards him. As expected, the newly matured treasure gourd was in a state of no return. It had a strange connection with the sword gourd of the same origin, which was why it had flown towards his clone. Following the treasure gourd were streaks of flowing light, which were the cultivators that had rushed over. The closest one was already 30 miles away. Lu Yi did not know which domain that guy came from, but his escape techniques were superb. He originally thought that he would be able to obtain the treasure, but when he focused his gaze, he saw a person appear in front of him. The treasure gourd flew directly to that person's side. That person's nose was almost crooked from anger as he shouted, "Don't touch the treasure if you don't want to die, or I'll chase you to the ends of the earth." How could the clone care about his threat? It was just that the current situation was a little different from what he had expected, which made him a little worried. The treasure gourd had flown to his clone's side as expected, and he thought that he could directly collect it. Who would have thought that when the clone reached out to grab it, the treasure gourd would lightly float away? From the looks of it, it did not want the clone to touch it. But it did not fly away, and instead continued to circle around the clone. At the same time, the sword gourd at the clone's waist vibrated more and more frequently, and so did the treasure gourd. It was as if the two treasure gourds were whispering to each other, communicating with each other. The clone tried twice more, but he still did not succeed. He did not dare to use too much force in case he startled the treasure gourd. This thing was quite spiritual. However, there was not much time left. In his field of vision, a large number of cultivators were rushing over, and they had all seen the situation here. If this continued, it would definitely be chaotic again. At that time, it would not be easy to collect the treasure gourd. Since he could not collect it, he could not just stand there and wait. The clone turned around and flew back the way he came. At the same time, he activated his spirit energy and gently wrapped it around the treasure gourd. Fortunately, the treasure gourd did not reject him. It continued to fly around the clone at a leisurely pace. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.